and get to talk to you for the first time in a stream ever.
And it looks like we're live. Well, hi everybody.
Is that kind of your standard issue intro? I don't usually listen to your podcasts.
There is no standard issue intro. This is a fucking Hatman show. What do you expect? He's always late, and something is going to fuck up. That's just the standard operating procedure here.
You got a little bit of tinniness going on in your voice too, kind of some distortion.
Super hell. Well, let's see if I can fix that. Hopefully this won't kill me.
I'm the one running on the super budget $25 Best Buy microphone. I used to have a pretty decent little headset. And then I guess one day my cat decided the cord looked tastier than her dinner.
Oh God. All right. Hopefully I'm not a robot now, but I can't make any promises.
There you go. You sound better.
Okay. Yep. That's what it is. Sometimes you got to use your phone as your fucking modem.
Oh, are you actually running off your cell phone?
Yep. Well, using that is basically the modem for my fucking laptop because
Okay, well they got that. They have that bridging software stuff I know about. Or do you have one of the little docks that plugs into your USB?
no, basically just my iPhone is magic.
iPhone?
I told you, I am a Mac heathen
Oh God.
in all senses of the term. I sold my soul to Apple probably a decade and a half ago.
Do you know what Mac OS is? It's an operating system for people who are too posh to use Windows but too dumb to run Linux.
Eh. You're really not wrong.
At least that's the way we used to say it back in the day.
You're really not wrong. But anyway, hi everyone. If you're actually listening to this bullshit, I'm the goddamn Hat Man. He's the goddamn Acid Man. I talked about Gamergate stuff last night, and I sort of name dropped Acid here, and he was like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's do a stream where we talk about some shit.
Well, it was actually one of our mutuals on Twitter. I'd been out with friends all day, and I got back home and I was checking my DMs because I've been talking with the head honcho over at Tech Raptor, trying to calm down this bubbling volcano that we've got going on. And I caught this DM in there. He said, "Hey, you were mentioned on this stream," and Hat basically said, "Where the hell is Acid Man who could talk about some of this crap?" I was like, it's been a long time. I've never done one of these things, owing to an old promise I made to the board, but there was an exception to that for talking about Gamergate related stuff, and I think this would probably qualify.
Seems like it, at the very least.
Well, Lord knows we got a lot of shit happening right now.
Oh, holy hell. I mean, at least it's not the level of weekend drama that we were used to about 2.5 years ago.
I remember the calendars that used to get sent around as an image macro. It's like Monday ethics, Tuesday dysnod, Wednesday, emails to developers or whatever. Then Saturday drama, Sunday drama.
Yep, pretty much. That's how it went. Hatman goes on vacation. Extra helping of drama.
I don't think I ever took a vacation when the board was like super active.
Nah, I kind of... Disney World was a thing, and Star Wars weekends was a thing. And then I later found out that was the last Star Wars weekends that they were going to have. So, kind of ruined it for me there, you bunch of assholes. But only kind of.
I work way too much to take vacation time most of the time. But it's nice. Got a situation where I love my job, so it never really feels like work.
Unfortunately, I don't have one of those jobs. The job that I just quit on Saturday was abysmal, and I'm glad to be out of there.
What were you doing?
Uh, Retail in
Gotcha.
word. Yeah, it was awful. Especially coming off of working at a fucking news station. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
that's kind of a shift, isn't it?
it. It really is. I was making more money in retail, surprisingly enough, but I hated every damn day of it, and it was always just a slog to get through. I had headaches constantly. I mean, I had to carry fucking Excedrin in my pocket whenever I would go in because I would need 4 or 5 pills by the time my shift was over.
Ugh.
Fuck that shit.
Yeah, I can see that.
Glad to be out of there though. Retail is better than being a waiter. Are they really so different though? Are they really that much different?
Well, it kind of depends on the circumstances, I think. Um, Trying to think here real quick. Like when I got out of college and I went after my first major employment, I made a rule for myself, and that was I was not going to work in two places, no matter what. I was not going to do big box retail, and I was not going to do fast food. And so what I wound up actually doing was I drove around all the nearby towns, and I went until I found a store that looked kind of interesting. It was a place that actually sold army equipment right outside an army base not too far from here.
Hmm.
And I walked in and I talked with the manager a little bit, and they happened to have a, we're hiring sign up on one of their windows. And I went back, and it was one of those businesses that was small enough you could actually walk in and talk to the guy who owns the place.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him my story. I was just out of college. My father had recently passed away. It was my first time kind of out in the workforce. And his stuff looked interesting, and I'd be happy to try learning how to sell it. And we talked for probably 2 hours back there over cups of coffee. And in the end, we shook hands, and he said, fill out an application. And they called me back the next day, said, you're hired.
Damn. How long ago was that, if you don't mind my asking?
That was '07. I
10
did.
years ago.
Yep. They started me off as a part-time register monkey, and I did that for about 3 months, and then they moved me to full-time. And I did that for about 6 months, and then they transferred me back to shipping. And I did really well back there. They put me in charge of training new employees after the first month. And then I got promoted again at the end of that year. And I actually, for a while, I had my own office in the company headquarters as the shipping manager.
Hmm.
I did that for about a year, and it was a good job. I got decent pay, but I was sitting in a chair at a computer all day. And the town that I was working in, a small town, a lot of greasy spoon diner type places.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big guy. I eat a lot. And I went from being a 265-pound muscly ex-weightlifter to 360 pounds.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and I started having circulation problems in my legs. And at the end of that year, I had to do something to get me out and active again. So I took up shooting, which is a hobby I had when I was a kid. And I joined the local gun range up there, and I fell in with this little gun store. And I got to know the owner real well. Became kind of a regular customer of his. And in about probably '09, I think it was February, he took an interest in selling guns on the internet, which he was an old guy who, cannot into computer type of deal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I taught him how to sell guns on the internet. And things kind of started to pick up for his business. And one day I was in there, and he told me, look, I kind of need you to shit or get off the pot. If you want to come work for me full time and help me sell guns, here's your invitation. And I said, oh, hell yes. And so that got me out of my office job, and I went to work for him as a full-time sales staff. And I did that for about 2 years and got promoted to store manager. And then a year after that, he kind of semi-retired and appointed me as the operations manager for his gun business. And I did that all the way up until February, March, April, would have been about the end of May 2015. And I moved out of there because I got an invitation from some of my customers who were running their own gun store to come up and run their operation for them full time because the guy that I was working under was looking at retiring. So I waltzed in and they turned over the keys and said, kind of, here you go, make it run. That's where I've been ever since, and it's been a blast.
Um, I don't know if you can really answer this question. I know it's a little or it could violate some kind of confidentiality if you or whatever. Have you had any interesting quote unquote customers come into your gun stores at all?
You always get interesting customers of both kinds. I've got a group of guys who comes in about once a month who could probably stock a National Guard armory with the amount of stuff that they've bought, but they're just a bunch of cool old country guys. And then every once in a while, especially at the old store, because it was a kind of a smaller, nastier town close to an army base, we used to get the occasional weirdos coming in. But they got introduced to the exit in a pretty reasonable manner if they did or said anything that was untoward.
Any massive conspiracy theorists popping in or
I got
anything
one.
like that?
He's kind of on the borderline of getting asked not to come back. He pops in every couple of months, and he's always on a rant about the Jews and every other thing. So far, he hasn't done anything to upset other customers or give me a concrete reason to ask him to leave, but I don't look forward to him wandering in, no. There's a point where you need to stop taking Alex Jones literally.
But no one who's come in talking about how the Hispanics are
Illuminati.
part of an Illuminati plot.
Not quite that bad. I'll tell you the weirdest one I ever had. I met my first Guido gangbanger one time.
Oh, dear Lord.
I want you to picture a guy, scrawny white kid in a wife beater, in the middle of fall. Comes in old cargo shorts, this white wife beater. He's got bleach blonde dreadlocks all the way down to his ass. He's wearing I'll never forget, he's wearing two different kinds of shoes. He has like a red Reebok on his right foot and like a black Nike on his left foot. Strike me down if I'm lying. And this dude comes in and he asks me if I got a deuce with him beams. and through a complicated sequence of hand gestures and grunting, we eventually managed to communicate across that a deuce referred to a semi-automatic 22 caliber target pistol with dim beams representing a tactical laser sight that's fitted to its front rail. So what the guy wanted was like a Walther P22 with a laser sight on it. But in his particular, I'm not sure what dimension he was from, but in their vernacular, you describe that as a deuce with dim beams. And I rather quickly informed him that no, we didn't. I don't have any deuces with dim beams, but you may wish to try the pawn shop and Gat Emporium up the way there. They may have one for you.
Jesus Christ.
That was my worst one. I will never forget the shoes thing.
Holy hell. I've heard some crazy stories, but
I did have a guy come in one time that I would swear to God was some kind of Russian hitman. This was during the height of the big Obama gun boom, and this is my old store that I was managing, which was the biggest gun shop in the region by a good sized margin. And I have this older gentleman come in one day, and he was wearing a suit. And he was wearing a suit like he wore a suit every day, if you understand my meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Nice jewelry, nice shoes, like alligator leather. And he came in and he asks me if I could get one of the then at the time brand new Barrett M107 50 caliber sniper rifles. And I called my big distributor I do business with out of Texas, and he says, yeah, we got 4 of them in the warehouse if you really want one. So I quoted this guy on one, and the price was like $13,500. And he says, "Thank you very much." And he strolls on out the door. I didn't see him again for about a week. And he walked in, and he was carrying a briefcase. And he comes back to the back counter and he says, "Could you call your supplier and see if they still have that Barrett available?" And so I call my guy back up and he says, "Yeah, we've still got 4 of them." And I tell the guy that they've got 4. He says, "I'd like to order 2. Is your price that you gave me still good?" And I says, "Absolutely." And like out of a fucking mobster movie, he puts this briefcase up on my counter and pops it. And inside are stacks of $50 bills with the bank bands still around them. And this guy counts me out $17,000 in cash. And I've got this massive steel drop safe in the gun store. And we counted all of that shit out and we put it in there. And I ordered him 2 50 caliber sniper rifles. And about 2 weeks later, they showed up. He came in, we did his paperwork, passed his background check with flying colors, picked up these 2 massive Pelican cases, and strolled on out the door. I never saw him again.
Damn. Damn. $50 bills. That's actually kind of creative.
Yep.
Damn. See, I've never had anything quite like that where I work, but I wholly expect I would not.
Well, that was one of the more interesting ones. I mean, you always get all types. A good gun store is like a good bar. Everybody's got a story. Everybody who works there knows your name. That's kind of what separates us from the big box places like Academy Sports and things like that. People want to come in and deal with somebody they actually know what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah.
And you don't get that, a place like Walmart, they hire somebody to run their gun counter back at Sporting Goods. The person usually might as well be selling shoes.
Yeah.
They've got a little bit of retail experience, but they're not a gun guy. It's funny, I actually went to college for 5 years on a double major doing physics and math, and never wound up using a lick of it apart from a few bits when we were doing an indoor gun range design. It's like there's no college degree for what I do.
No, not really. It's basically hobbyist or ex-military, seems like.
Yeah, it's well, even ex-military. And I love soldiers. Probably a third of my major friend circle are all soldiers from Fort Riley. They know weapons, but they know the weapons that they were trained on. Like I can hand any of those guys any brand of AR-15, and they're as much of an expert on it as I am. We start talking about the more exotic Benelli shotguns, and just like everybody else, it's kind of deer in headlights. I got a laugh out of that because you always hear liberals talking about shit like, one of the old arguments we used to see for gun control back in the 90s was, hey, people need like military or police level training experience to handle guns and stuff like that. And it doesn't really work that way.
Nope. I don't think you need military or police level experience to operate a fucking 223 rifle.
I'll tell you what, we actually had police qualifying at our indoor range. Here's the test that police, at least in our state, have to pass. They have to fire 50 rounds every 6 months. That's a single box of ammo. And at 7 yards, I think it was 7 yards, on a silhouette target, you got the big, like 2.5 by 3 foot paper target that has a silhouette on it. They have to get at least 25 out of 50 in the black, in the actual target zone that represents the person. If they can do that, that's their weapon qualification.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
The average pistol hobbyist who goes to the range once a month just to have fun can shoot that well, if not far better.
Now, is there a caliber requirement for that at all?
No, they have to qualify with whatever their normal service pistol is.
Oh, okay.
Which in this state is probably 90% a combination of 9mm and 40 cal, with a few departments using 45s.
No 10mm anywhere?
No, I am a huge 10 millimeter geek, but it's not used in any official capacity around here.
That's a damn shame. I was about to say if they could use it with any fucking gun, just take a 22 out there and you're basically set.
That's actually what a lot of people do for their concealed carry license qualifications. Is especially the women, they'll come and they'll qualify with a 22 where they wind up actually packing like a 38 revolver or something.
Mm-hmm. I think for here, whatever you take the shooting test with, it has to be what you're planning on carrying. But I could be completely wrong on that. I don't know much about.
I just want to
North
say to the
Carolina's
jokers
concealed
over in the
carry
chat
test.
real quick that Asuka is my waifu, not my avatar. Best girl.
Countdown to the how disgusting jokes.
You know, half the reason why I use her as my freaking kind of go everywhere representation, just because of the salt it generates.
You wouldn't think it would generate that much outrage.
I don't know. Well, let's just say that there's a copy pasta, not a copy pasta, an image macro that makes its way around 8chan sometimes. That it's like Asuka versus Ray. You two have been doing this shit for 20 fucking years, or something like that. I really want to just pin Trump down sometime and ask him which one he would pick.
And if Trump says Kaoru, then we're fucked.
Nah, you know he's gonna want the energetic go-getter redhead who's all competitive and shit. He's not gonna put up with some submissive little silver-haired doll.
Well, obviously, if he answers anything but Asuka, the proper response is, "What are you, stupid or something?"
Antabaka.
I guess if you want to go with the whole subtitle thing, but oh dear God.
Hey, it's the internet, man. We reserve the right to discuss memes at our leisure.
Dank memes in the electric dream.
The electric dream? You lost me on that one.
Yeah, the electric dream. Do
What's...
androids stream of electric memes?
Oh, okay, gotcha. Well, I guess we should probably turn on to some of the Gamergate related stuff at the moment.
Probably so. I think that's what some people are.
That was the stated point of our discussion. Although
I think that's what some people are waiting for. So where the hell do we start? Should we start with the whole Tech Raptor thing?
Yeah, that's kind of what I've been thinking about. It's like there's so much backstory to this, and it's not like I've come out with regular updates on this streaming type crap. Yeah, I guess we can take a look at the Tech Raptor scenario. So I've been talking a little bit with the owner of Tech Raptor via Twitter DM, just trying to kind of smooth a little bit of this stuff over, and most importantly, figure out what their intentions with what they did really were. And I'm not perfect, I'm not Denzel Washington, the negotiator, but I do a lot of business, and a lot of it's face-to-face and conversation type stuff. I don't think I'm a terrible conversationalist when it comes to the issues. And what I think is going on is that Tech Raptor, they got the spotlight shown on them by the whole Steam curator controversy there from about a week ago. And when that happened, attention got drawn to a lot of their older Gamergate-related articles, because that was, of course, the evidence that everybody was pointing out from the SJW and Journo clique shit media side. Hey, these guys are Gamergaters, blah, blah, blah. Well, it wasn't that Tech Raptor was offended by their Gamergate content being pointed out. It's that they were offended by the low quality level of the articles that were written at the time. Basically, I guess what I'm trying to say is if the same articles containing the same information were on the site but in a better written and presented form, those articles would not have been deleted, irrespective of them being involved with Gamergate. But they jumped the gun to try and clean up and sort of curate this old content because and I read back through some of the pieces, and while the information in the pieces was good, especially for the time, because we were still trying to figure out a lot of the shit that was going on too. Um, yeah, the writing and the overall quality of the pieces was kind of spotty. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not a professional journalist or a writing analyst or anything like that, but they read like something you'd read on kind of an amateur blog.
Yeah,
With,
speaking as someone with that kind of a background, yeah, and I think it could really be attributed to the fact that TechRaptor was a fledgling site at that point in
exactly,
time. It
exactly.
started, I think, like a month or two before Gamergate actually got into full swing.
Yeah, between
So,
then and now, their own standards for the work that they have has gone way up,
yes,
and they were embarrassed at the quality of those pieces. And so they
yes,
decided, hey, let's shit can these real quick. And then we had two fuck ups happen almost simultaneously. One was that the article that announced that those pieces was going to be removed has that infamous paragraph in it where they kind of, and I really should have looked before I started talking about this, but the author of that piece, whose name I don't know at the moment, um, that one paragraph sounded like he was trying to distance TechRaptor from any involvement in Gamergate.
that was Andrew Otten.
Yeah,
He was the guy
it's
who
kind
wrote that.
and it's if you want to read it that way, you can definitely read it as being a weasel worded condemnation of us. So that perked up a lot of ears, and I think got a lot of folks kind of focused on our side toward this article and what TechRaptor was doing from the get go. And then the other issue was that they decided to just delete the articles outright without just updating them or posting a not exactly a retraction, but some sort of statement on the article that this is an older piece, it's not up to our current quality standards, and archiving them or something like that.
Yeah,
They just kind of opted to memory hole them instead, which is an understandable mistake to make because TechRaptor is not a professional outlet still. They're an amateur outlet in the process of transitioning to become a professional outlet. They're going to fuck things up from time to time. But when you combine that with the way it looked with that paragraph that they wrote and the fact that most of those early articles were GG related, yeah, it looks pretty fucking bad.
yeah, to say the least.
Yeah. But at the same time, you got to remember that looks can be deceiving. And at least in my view, and this is the view that I've been trying to convince some other people to, when in doubt, you give your allies and your at least friendly neutrals, because I don't think we could call TechRaptor an unfriendly neutral, the benefit of the doubt. When you have at least a plausible explanation, you give them the benefit of assuming that it's not the malicious intent right off the bat.
Yeah, this is and it's something that me as a former contributor to TechRaptor, I was there for a couple of months a year ago, almost exactly. Um, is something that's been a little bit difficult for me to process because it seems like the whole situation got bungled in how they handled it,
Yep.
but at the same time, knowing these guys and having worked with them fairly recently, I can say that I don't think that there was any sort of malicious intent. I don't think this was to not so much like kowtow to the typical SJW crowd that was crucifying them for being pro Gamergate, but rather a way to further legitimize themselves as becoming a Steam curator was going to.
Right. And
A lot of
no, go ahead.
a lot of the things that got hit were editorials, and in their explanation, they said they want to focus more on gaming news and whatnot, less on editorials, and also less on the tech side, which is probably not going to do them too well for the name TechRaptor. But
Right.
what the hell can you do?
Yeah, but maybe in a year we see their spin-off become Game Raptor or something along those lines. It's I think I understand why they might make the move in getting away from tech and more into gaming. Because to me, it seems just logically that it's probably a lot more work intensive and money intensive to cover the tech industry specifically than to just focus on a more narrow corner of it like gaming.
That, and also, if I remember correctly, they only had like one or two guys actively publishing tech articles, and most of the time it was just news, just repackaged stuff.
Right.
Reviews were very difficult because you basically had to obtain it on your time.
Right.
And it
And
really wasn't worth it either because those articles didn't get a whole lot of attention. TechRaptor mostly got their traffic from gaming related stuff.
right. And it's, you can say that TechRaptor is not an explicitly pro GG site, and I think that's true. But at the same time, we did provide them with a good deal of backing. It
Mm-hmm.
was our campaign that got them the Kickstarter funding to go to E3, for example. Um, we did a lot of little things like that. We promoted them in some polls. Um, we backlinked them a lot in certain places when we did like link bombings and just a lot of little things like that to try and help boost their exposure in the web as a whole. Because, a lot of the time, any click that they get is one that Kotaku doesn't.
Truth.
And I think I can understand the move away from tech. I'm just imagine if you want to cover the tech industry and be kind of the first ones to cover it on the bleeding edge type of deal, you're going to have a presence in the Hellmouth in San Francisco.
That and a lot of capital.
Yeah, if you want to go to these trade shows, it's not free. Even
No.
if your admittance is free as a journalistic outlet, you got to go down there. You're paying the travel trip, you're paying room, you're paying board, you're paying expenses. And then you got the issue with potential corruption that comes in, because if you've got these companies who are paying your way, as we discovered so commonly back at the beginnings of Gamergate, then you wind up even with a subconscious bias not to piss those people off, lest you wind up with a kind of a Jeff Gerstmann scenario.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So I think that's probably a smarter move for them to just stick to covering gaming. I mean, God knows there's plenty of audience out here from us who are interested in honest gaming sites.
See, the thing with TechRaptor is they never outright claim to be pro Gamergate, like
Correct.
from the get go.
But
And
and just as a counterpoint to that, though, we've never had an obligation in the past that any of them had to receive our support.
exactly, that is the truth. If anyone would give Gamergate a fair shake, period, then naturally, they were going to get more support from us because,
Right.
let's face it, the other websites didn't. So of course, we sort of had a grudge against them. We would take neutrals as readily as we would take allies.
Yeah, and contrast that with the other side, who, declaring yourself to be neutral on the Gamergate issue, you might as well have thrown up the Roman salute and shouted "Sieg Heil" to a portrait of Keck.
Yeah, I think,
So,
but I think the whole TechRaptor is pro GG thing still stems from that old fucking Medium article that Zoe Quinn herself penned about how
well, yeah,
TechRaptor kissed up to Gamergate. There's a whole section in there is talking about ethics in games journalism, and she just blasts TechRaptor because they talked about me and they weren't positive, so fuck them. They're pro Gamergate.
Well, if you remember back in 2014, and looking back on this in kind of a big picture strategic viewpoint, the articles and hit pieces and even shit like Medium blogs that Zoe Quinn did were all ammunition that they could have from the time of deployment to reference back to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Gamergate had the rare event of watching cytogenesis of false media in real time happening right in front of us.
why didn't we come up with fake news back then?
Well, I think even fake news in the current day didn't really take off until Dr. President, God Emperor of the United States of America, Donald J. Time Traveler Trump, decided to make it a major issue using his social media platform.
Yeah, which is,
I mean, according
hilarious.
to Chris von Cephalby back in the day, at our height, Gamergate numbered about 250,000 people across the world.
Jesus.
But Trump has 1.4 million Twitter followers, I think, or it might even be more than that. Hang on
No,
a
I
second.
think it's way. I think it's several million that he's
Yeah,
got.
I think I'm misrepresenting that number real quick. Hang on, I'm a little bit leery of using this standalone version of Firefox too heavily because it's running on my own profile.
42 million followers on Twitter.
Oh hell, something just
Just the
happened.
straight number.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hang on a second. I just lost my volume.
Well, shit.
Let's try that. Here, you want to say something real quick?
Something real quick.
Hey, there we go. Okay.
Much better.
Yeah, case in point. I don't want to push this browser real hard. Let's see here. At real Donald Trump. He is presently sitting at, yeah, how about 42 million?
Yeah, that's
Just ignore me, I suck cocks type of situation there. But,
disregard that. I suck cocks.
There you go. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, so he was able to put that out on blast, and the meme kind of stuck. I don't think even at our height we would have been able to engage the mainstream media to that level.
No.
It was no secret, even during the early days of Gamergate, I've always been rooting for a sort of Gamergate-like campaign to kick the MSM in the nuts. And it took a crazy billionaire real estate mogul to make it happen. We truly live in the weirdest timeline.
This absolutely is. And it blows my mind how people still are trying to say that Gamergate was the precursor to all this. Gamergate effectively made the Trump campaign what it was and got him elected. Gamergate is in the White House right now.
You know what, though? Fucking own it. Why not? If they have to have a boogeyman, why not let it be us?
I mean, that's why I said after those first articles dropped, if I was the head of KIA and Gamergate got into the fucking White House and effectively became the most powerful person in the world, does that make me the man who sold the world?
I don't know. At the very beginning, I was not firmly on the Trump train. I was one of the people who believed back at the start that Trump was in there because of his prior friendship with the Clintons, especially back in the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
that he was there to be a spanner in the works, that he was going to go for the Republican nomination and then intentionally fuck it all up to hand the presidency to Hillary. Because Trump is, I love him as president now, but as a personal individual, he's a sleazy son of a bitch. He always kind of has been. But he's a sleazy businessman son of a bitch, which if you're a wealthy businessman trying to do business in New York and you're not a scumbag, you're not going to make it.
Pretty much, yeah.
I originally voted for him on the troll ticket. I said to myself, the media hates this guy. The Republicans hates this guy. The Democrats hate this guy. If he does, all these people that I hate, if you made a laundry list of every scum-sucking idiot from the United Nations on down through the American political establishment, all of them hated Trump. And I said to myself, you know what? If he wins and he accomplishes nothing else but going in and sitting in that chair for 4 years and making all of those son of a bitches mad as hell every day, he was worth the vote. But after he actually got in, just his first month in office was incredibly impressive. And after he kept taking the slings and arrows from the media and kept kind of swinging back, I realized that, this guy, he is kind of a mouth-breathing demagogue, but God damn it, he's for real.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't agree with him on everything. I've certainly made my my criticisms of him known on social media and on our politics podcast, but
yeah, and there's plenty there to criticize too.
Yeah, but I'll be damned if he's not doing if not a fine job, a job nonetheless.
Even where he's failed, he's at least attempted, which is more than prior administrations would have dared to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I really also appreciate the fact that he's trying to undo a lot of the executive meddling that
Yes.
was present in the Obama administration. Basically, just sending it back to Congress and saying, "Okay, now we don't have to worry about one person fucking around with all this. We can let the proper elected officials decide it.
Correct.
And if it gets bungled, then you can blame Congress for that, and then fuck them over. And you don't have to wait 4 years to
8 years, sir.
or 8 years. That's right.
I've got, liberal friends and conservative friends. I'm pretty big in the gamer circles around my hometown here. And this is the way that I took to describing my thoughts on Trump to my liberal friends. I would say if your country ideally should be more important to you than your own life. This is why soldiers go to war. And if your life is important to you and you're going on trial, and the penalty for losing your court case is that you're going to be executed, you have a choice of two lawyers. One of them is a shining golden boy, honest Injun, always tells the truth, does everything right, proper, and by the books. Your other choice is a scum-sucking sleazebag from the lowest gutter of New York City, who will lie, who will cheat, who will steal, who would sell his own mother into sexual slavery if that's what it took to win your case. I want the sleazeball. And I found that when I just started describing him in those kind of terms, it kind of turned some light bulbs on. It sort of bashed its way through the Nazi deflector shield, that they run on their eyeball blinders these days. And I was actually able to have a cogent conversation with them.
Yeah, I don't get that many conversations. It seems like of the people I know, there are very, very few, and by that I mean like maybe one or two total, that are either, or not either, that are, I guess I could say ambivalent enough to have a conversation that allows for criticism of, either candidate in last year's election. Everyone else is either 100% Trump is evil, Hillary should have been president, or 100% Trump is God, Emperor, MAGA.
Yeah, I enjoy the God Emperor memes. I like them mostly because of how much they piss off liberals.
I will say I do enjoy the memes. I do enjoy the God Emperor. The can I still say rare Pepes? Is that even a thing anymore?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's still a thing.
But are they still rare? That's the thing.
Oh God, I am so looking forward to this rollout of Twitter's new censorship horseshit for hate
Oh,
groups.
holy hell!
I've got a $500 bet riding that they put Vivian on the list.
Oh my fucking God! If they do, if they do.
Well, Pepe's on it because Empress Hillary told them so back a year ago.
It's a cartoon frog that just so happened to come up.
And they've got to be taking input on this from the glorious Twitter Trust and Safety Council, which we all know who the fuck is sitting on that.
Oh my fucking God.
So I will bet you dollars to dragon dildos that we wind up with Viv on that list. What'll be hilarious is to see if everybody switches to Gilda just to troll them.
Or oh God, what was the color swapped one?
Oh, Lillian Woods.
Yes.
There's some really good porn of her out there. I just want to point that out.
Good, you say.
I hear a siren in the background. You must be getting swatted right now.
Yep, I just got a text from my dad. If there was a bad wreck on my road. He's an EMT, so he's always like, just want to make sure I'm not, responding to a call that involves you being dead.
That's always a nice phone call to get.
Yeah, well, yeah, hey Dad, sorry, but I kind of died in this car accident. If you get my computer, just delete my internet history, please.
Don't share it with the coroner.
No,
they don't need to know. As we see a few days later, somebody has got like national news. We see the Gelburu search history of the Hatman. That one open tab in the browser.
That one open tab is
Who the hell was that? Was that Eichenwald? He had
yes,
the guy who was showing was it tentacle porn to his kids or something like that.
My kids were showing me how to find tentacle porn on the internet.
No, he was showing his kids to prove that it exists.
Oh my fucking god!
Yeah, I think that was it.
I don't remember what the hell it was. All I know is that it involved tentacle porn and children, and it reminded me of that one part of Whose Line Is It Anyway? I think it was a deleted scene where Colin Mockery goes, "We're watching animal porn." Oh my fucking god!
So yeah, we've got. If you want to take a quick recap, there's a running thread over on Gamergate HQ, kind of the current status of our old rogues gallery in the media. We got all these outed as sex pests. There's a thread running for that, and of course we've got 3 ex-bigwigs of GG Revolt are all in jail at the moment.
Oh, 3 of them.
Yeah,
I knew Ralph in Seattle, but who's the other one?
Endomorphosis is currently serving a prison sentence in the state of Oregon.
Right.
Both for their revenge porn law and for running from his first jail appointment and having to get caught.
That's right. I totally forgot about him.
Yeah, they finally caught his ass a month or 2 ago.
Holy shit.
Yeah. I don't know what kind of railroading he's going to get for skipping out on his court date, but hopefully he's spending some comfortable bunk time with Bubba.
Well, I guess we can say that Operation Kill the Hatman has officially been canceled.
Oh, was he one of the ones involved?
Pretty much everyone in GG Revolt was involved. That was... Holy fuck. Oh my god, that was fun. I still think it was... there was some sort of coordination between the... Hatman wants to remove all SJW content from KIA post on KIA, of course, and that the fact that was the day that I went on fucking vacation. Like, there's no way that wasn't coordinated.
Did you ever announce anywhere you were going on vacation?
I did on Twitter, and okay. I think the tweet in question was like a month or 2 old at the time. And it just got dredged up and
well, that kind of fits with their MO.
Yeah.
That whole arrangement was a fucking shit show. And my god, the layers of tinfoil they put on everything. It's like to this day, when I get into the occasional argument with one of their ex-idiots, I'll get accused of the same exact thing, trying to censor SJW content on Gamergate HQ. They had a fucking sticky thread at the top of the board that they could discuss all they wanted in that. And for a time, we even did cyclical threads. It's like, it's literally right there. You can go to the board and click on it right now and talk about anything SJW related you want. Or if it's an industry related SJW problem and you want to do an operation or a dig on it, you can make a thread right on the fucking board. But that wasn't the point. The point wasn't that compromise wasn't good enough. It was something they could fit in a bumper sticker soundbite and use as ammunition to attack the board with.
Pretty much. So from the chat, if I get killed by a Russian hitman, who's going to avenge me? I don't think anyone is going to give enough of a fuck to avenge me. I think someone will probably take up the mantle of the Hat 3, and that will be as much as is done. Oh
god, I got a point from the chat here too. What is GG Revolt?
Oh my fucking god.
Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, smoke if you got them and buckle the fuck up.
I'm gonna need the liquor for this one.
My rate of Monster Juice consumption has exceeded my rate of Monster Juice acquisition. All right, so let's open this can of worms real quick. You're going to have to forgive me a little bit because I may get a couple things out of order. It's been a long fucking time and a lot of stuff happened. So let's rewind this to about 2015. It's not real commonly known outside of 8chan how the fucking how Gamergate HQ wound up becoming the main board as far as Gamergate discussion went. To make a very long story very short, um, the previous two Gamergate boards both had a problem where the owner of the board was involved heavily in social media and kind of got mixed in with basically trolls. To give you a good example for those who remember who Pterodax is,
Ah, yes.
he got in cozy with Nico of Death, who is the original board owner of the /GG board. That was the original board that V set up when we first moved to 8chan. And the idea was that V would be the main discussion hub at the time. That's where all the detailed planning and stuff would go. But then we had this large public board that was open to everybody. And it was designed to kind of serve as a shill and troll magnet because it was right there apparent on the top bar. So if you came to 8chan looking to fuck around with Gamergate, there's the Gamergate board right there at the top of the site. That'd be the first place that you'd click. And so things went on pretty well for quite a while. But then Nico got kind of close with Pterodax, and he started fooling around with these trolls on Twitter and other social media sites, IRC especially. And it wound up where I don't remember what started the drama, but he was in some kind of a slap fight with a big chunk of the community on the board for a while, and he made this stupid joke that he was going to turn over a mod position on the board to Pterodax. And people lost their shit, and a mass migration started. Basically, it came up, the decision was made that the board owner was no longer trustworthy, because this was still in the beginnings of 2015, late 2014. Shit was pretty sensitive back then. The war was still at its peak. We were still getting happenings every fucking day. We couldn't afford to be risking shit getting screwed around. So there was a mass migration from GG to the /Gamergate board. And at the time, I actually was mistaken. The person who set up the board, as far as I had known, had been Drybones. And so I had operated for a long time under the assumption that Drybones was actually the owner of the board. In reality, ownership of the board had transferred to a guy named Blade. And things went on for a while and were pretty good. And then I noticed that a pattern was kind of emerging where Blade was falling in on Twitter with some of these same trolls. Some of the same guys in the IRC, Pterodax was back in there, and then this group of trolls that had popped up on Twitter, kind of nominally pro-GG at first. They called themselves A-Team, or at least other people called them that. It's kind of disputable depending on who you're talking to. Anyway, I was watching Drybones at the time, and he'd been going through some drama and some kind of minor personal issues. And he was starting to sour on the community on the boards a little bit. And I was watching him, and I kind of had this thoughts like, these guys are all sort of in this big social circle together. And this is the same kind of thing that happened with Nico. So if Drybones is about to burn out, and it kind of looked like he might have been, what the hell is going to happen to the board this time? So I've always been a little bit of the industrious side, I guess. God help me. So I said, fuck it. I'm going to go make a backup board on 8chan just in case Drybones loses his shit. And so I created Gamergate HQ. I left it as an unlisted board. I set up some basic, little shit. I created some moderator accounts in case it would ever be needed. And I never figured on using it. It's like, I'm going to create this as a just in case, and it's just going to chill here. And if shit somehow hits the fan, at least we have a fallback. I've always been a little bit of a commando, so kind of be prepared is just, that's something that's sort of in my blood, I guess. Anyway, 2 fucking days later, I get home from work and I check in on the V threads, and 8chan is in an uproar because not Drybones, who I thought was the owner of the board, but Blade, who actually was, had flipped his shit and had turned the keys to the board over to some trolls from A-Team who had trashed the place utterly. In fact, I still have screen caps of what the board looked like in the aftermath. And V was already at work. They had polls running and shit, trying to figure out who the next board was going to be. Anyway, to prune things down a little bit simpler so I don't get lost in the exposition here, I threw my hat into the running. And when I did, the choice was coming down in between the GG board, the original board, supposedly under new ownership, and Gamergate HQ, because I was a fairly known quantity on each Hands V board. It's like, self-admitted, I'm a little bit of a spurg, but I'm a responsible spurg. And so at least people knew me. They figured I wouldn't be burning the fucking place down anytime soon if I got ownership of it. So we wound up with this weird split where GG took about 50% of the people who were migrating from the old board, and we got about the other 50%. And my whole shtick was the main thing that I always hated in terms of the Gamergate boards was the drama and the infighting. And basically the rules on the board were tailored so that everybody was allowed to contribute, from KIA to fucking poll, the most hardcore on any side you wanted to go, the worst SJW haters, the most hardcore people pushing for the ethics front type stuff. But they weren't allowed to shit on each other on the board. It was the rule of the day was kind of, when you guys come here, set your differences aside, do whatever it is you came to do. And then when you head back on into kind of your own spaces, if you want to bitch at each other from there, no problem. And that was kind of the rule system that we set up. It was actually it was kind of made more for poll, in all honesty, because the moderation staff of the Gamergate board, the /Gamergate, had, I'd been over there and I'd posted numerous times anonymously, and I had watched a lot of people from poll trying to contribute stuff and getting shat on. Like the whole, the go back to poll memes type of deal. Well, I don't call myself explicitly right wing, but I am a little bit of a Polak. I'm kind of a right leaning militant centrist, and I just never liked the way that they got treated, and I never liked the fact that the mods allowed them to be treated that way. If I got treated that way, I'd have a pretty short temper about it, and eventually I'd fuck off and just quit contributing. And I think that's what happened to a lot of them. So the rules on my board were tailored to not let that happen anymore. That was the original rule 3, I believe, was no infighting. And then, of course, we had the usual, the word filters to prevent direct linking from shit sites like Kotaku and things like that. Well, the guys who didn't want to have a heavily moderated board, who just kind of wanted to be able to do whatever, sort of the way I used to describe it was they wanted B, but Gamergate flavored. They went to GG because that was the kind of moderation that was being promised there. And things were split for a little while. I want to say probably like 3 weeks, something like that, maybe less. But a leak came out from Meowstick, who you'll probably remember from KIA.
Yep.
Yeah, from I believe it was A-Team's private chat, where they were describing how they had gotten a hold of the GG board and were actually the ones who owned it. And their plan was that they were going to let everybody rebuild on GG and then trash it again to kind of yank the rug out from under us for a epic troll. So that put the final nail in that coffin, and the refugees leaving GG came over to our board. And things were all right. It was a little bit tense at first. There were some complaints about the rules that were existent. I pointed out to the community, it's like, look, if you guys want the rules changed, you're free to petition that. But in the time that you've been over there, we've been wrestling with this shit. We've taken votes on the rules that we wanted. If you guys wanted to participate, this would be the you're a little late to the party, is basically what I was saying. Like, you guys get to have input on changes, but we're not going to rewrite the whole rules list just to suit you.
Yeah.
And that caused a little bit of drama, but things settled in for a while. I took a community satisfaction poll after the first month or so, and the vast, vast majority was at least positive about the board. So things were going pretty good. Well, then we come along. Let's see, there were 2 major issues, I think, that caused the split. The first one was the probably the biggest of the 2, which is the great gaming site game developer boycott debacle. And basically we had this operation that had been long running in GG called Operation Rebuild. And the point of Rebuild was to reach out to friendly outlets and directly to developers to try and build a bridge between the gaming communities and the developer communities that would bypass the shit games media entirely. Well, at the same time, we would prop up and boost, good kind of pro gamer outlets like like Tech Raptor, like Niche Gamer. Um, I think it was Jenny Barrage was pushing one for a while called Based Gamer. I'm not entirely
Mm-hmm.
sure whatever happened with that one, but that was kind of the long term operation that we'd come up with, and that generated a lot of heat because at the same time we had this major push coming from certain sides of the community that wanted to boycott sort of SJW tainted game developers. And there was a good argument there on both sides of it. But the issue was that Op Rebuild was longer running. It was meant to be a very long term kind of industry improvement plan. And frankly, it had come along first and kind of made its place on the board already. Having an operation that was pro developer on one hand, but also boycotting and punishing developers on the other, being run out of the same board, the same hub site, it's a pretty big conflict, I think. And I got to pet my dog here for a second. Go lay down. Basically, the two operations conflicted with one another. I wasn't immediately opposed to the boycott idea. In fact, there's a couple of companies that I boycott, Capcom being a good one. But you can't give with one hand while beating with the stick with the other hand and expect either side to take you seriously. There was also a lot of resentment in the community to the boycotting idea. It had come up for a vote several times on GG and Gamergate. Every time it had been shot down. So we tried to do what we thought was a decent compromise at the time, which was if you guys want to discuss boycotts on the board, you can. But you can discuss merits for or against, philosophical positions and things like that. But actually organizing a boycott against a specific developer needs to go over to the V board, the video games board instead, and not use the Gamergate hashtag. And the reason why we split it up that way was so that if the community opinion should change, we didn't want people to not be able to argue the position for boycotts. But until community consensus changed to be pro boycott, we weren't going to let people actually organize it. You know, if they had, 3 months or 6 months or a year, or whatever, and the opinion of the board had slowly changed to say, okay, Operation Rebuild is clearly not going to work in the long term, we would be better off boycotting unfriendly game developers and outlets instead. If that became the majority opinion, we could have changed the rules to reflect that. But then in the meantime, if you wanted to run a boycott right the F now, you could go over to V and organize it there. Boycotts were welcome on V. They always were. Or somebody, I think it was that faggot Wolfgar. He created, I think it was him. They created a Gamergate boycotts or GG boycotts board that we directed traffic to for a little bit until somebody pointed out that it might be some kind of a shill board, at which point we just directed it over to V. I thought the whole situation was a fairly decent compromise on the matter, but there were some very loud minority factions on the board who were not pleased with it at all. And there was a lot of drama that started up over that. And to the point that I want to say it went on for probably about a month like that. And we had this big issue come up on the board. We were getting these visits. You could actually see it in the moderator panel. When you're in the admin panel on an 8chan board, there's an option where you can see the most recent posts. And you get an idea after looking at that for a while what your normal posting patterns on the board look like. Regular people show up. Most of the users on the board had post histories going back for months, for instance. And we would get these visits. You'd have a bunch of people all show up at the same time within 2 or 3 minutes of each other, like a cluster of about a dozen of them. And if you check their IP hashes, none of them had ever posted on the board before. And they would all show up and they would push some idea, great example, we should boycott game developers. And they do this for a couple of hours across multiple threads, bumping multiple threads, sometimes showing up in getting moderated because they'd push things a little too hard. And then they'd all disappear around the same time. Within a couple of minutes of each other, they'd all just go poof after about 2 hours of hitting the board. And you'd never see them again. Those same IP hashes would never appear again until about a week later. It was usually on a Friday or a Saturday. a new group about the same size doing about the same thing would show up again. And they'd do it for about the same amount of time, and then poof, they'd all vanish again. So we got this idea. We took to calling these shill storms, kind of a play on words for shitstorm. It had every earmark of a group coming onto the board who had sort of coordinated elsewhere. It'd be like if you or I had a whole bunch of close friends on Twitter and we wanted to go brigade a thread. It was that type of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started paying more attention to these, and we started getting a lot of them suddenly that were pushing for Gamergate to boycott developers. And it actually got so bad that at one point I had something like a dozen threads in the catalog that were locked. Because at the time, the way we were enforcing the rules was we weren't just outright deleting threads that were causing problems. We'd lock them, usually with a statement from the mods. And so I had like a dozen threads locked in the catalog, and somebody else finally posted another one, and I just got pissed off at the whole thing. It's like, I can't sit here all fucking day babysitting this, especially when we've laid it out in the rules. We've explained why we're doing it this way a dozen times. And it's clearly not the majority of the board who's doing it, because all of these posts are being made by these fucking little visitors coming in. So I remember I posted a final response in the bottom of the most current thread, and then I locked that thread, and then I stickied it. And then I started handing out bans to all the IP hashes that were pushing it. And there was probably about 10 of them, I think. And I don't remember if it was permas or I did like a 3-day or what the dealio was. It's been a long time. Anyway, within about an hour of that, the board fucking blew up with spam. Fresh IP addresses on every post. There was some janitor, he does it for free type copy pasta being pushed out on there. Usual tactics, but the fact that it was coming from fresh IPs on every post was what was telling us that it wasn't the normal community members who were there who were pissed at us over this. Like, we took plenty of complaints from like what I would call actual anons who were posting on the boards. Like, you look at them, okay, they've, here's his post history. He's contributed a few things across a couple of threads. He's making a valid criticism and not just reeing into the dark. Let's listen to him. We did that a lot. But these guys were in here just kind of causing a shitstorm. So we fought back the spam for a while, and this went on for like 3 solid hours. Just the moderators and I playing whack-a-mole with spammers. And finally, this stream request pops up from a guy named Raziel, who is acquainted with Gaten Satan, who you may remember used to do a lot of Gamergate streams. And they were going to do a stream about the boycott issue. And so this stream pops up, and everybody tunes in to watch it. They were actually trying to get me to come on it, but I had a very strict no stream, no IRC policy back then. The whole point of that was to guarantee that I would not fall to the same type of cancer that had wrecked the prior 2 boards. That was kind of my promise to them, that I wasn't in this for my ego. And so we have this talk, and they're trying to push for boycotts on this stream. A lot of people were against it. And finally, it comes down that they want to do it was boycotting pre-orders of games for the holiday season, I think was the final idea that they put out. And quite a few people were actually on board with that one. Hell, I was one of them. One thing that I did is I spoke with Gaten Satan privately on Twitter. And I told him, it's like, you've got to stop calling this a boycott. It's like, if we want to do an awareness campaign, of shitty industry practices, that's one thing. But if you call it a boycott, you're going to turn off the entire anti-developer boycott faction of Gamergate, which at the time was the majority. If you just change up how you're describing it a little bit, but push the same essential idea, I think this can really take off. I actually offered to sticky him a thread on Gamergate HQ promoting it. But they were not interested. They insisted that it be called a pre-order boycott. And after going back and forth with him probably for 45 minutes or an hour, I finally threw my hands up and just walked away from it. But something stuck out about the whole thing. That as soon as there seemed to be a kind of tacit agreement with Satan that the pre-order boycott thing might go forward, suddenly the spam all stopped. And the little visitor accounts all disappeared. And the janitor copy pastas stopped. We hadn't changed anything on the rules. We hadn't unlocked any of the threads. But it was like as soon as Satan had something that he wanted, the whole thing just went away. And that kind of set off a red flag in the back of my mind. It's like the timing was way too much of a coincidence. I'm not like super paranoid. I do believe that coincidences exist, but this repeated pattern that I had of these people showing up, combined with the timing of this stream and the whole boycott issue and just how seriously they were, they almost took it personally that Gamergate wasn't interested in pushing developer boycotts at that time. That kind of set off a red flag, and I started to get this suspicion in the back of my head as to just who it might have been who was paying visits to our board to push this shit in groups. Well, anyway, as far as I remember, the pre-order boycott thing never really amounted to anything. They insisted on continuing to call it a boycott. A bunch of people were turned off on it. The sticky thread that I offered on GGHQ never really materialized because they never really made a thread for it. And I vaguely recall, like, at least some people were just outright shouting them down, like it was they were trying to get the camel's nose under the tent as far as pushing developer boycotts later. So that kind of fizzled out. And then we had the continuing issue for about the next 3 months over the Christmas season of constant complaints about the board rules. There was a very loud, very vociferous minority on the board who were extremely agitated about any enforcement of the rules. It got to the point we could spot these, what we were calling shill storms, coming in pretty quickly. And it actually, as you'll probably recall, remember, I used to give you a heads up on those.
Yep, do you remember that?
Yeah, we would get hit, and we could watch the thing go down in real time, and I would shoot you a DM, and a couple hours later, when they got done bombarding us, they were over on KIA hitting you guys.
Yep, then, that's when I started making the list of people for the. I think we called them the Cabal, and I think that was their actual name.
Yeah, I actually spoke. I had a private conversation with Satan a long time after that, where he broke down what the whole thing was, and yeah, that Cabal, quote unquote, was the word that they used to describe themselves.
That's kind of ironic because that's what we use for them. But yeah, that's when I started making notes of who was saying these things.
Whoop. Hang on a second. I figure out why this is happening. My audio is like randomly muting itself for some reason. There we go. Might be a glitch in this Firefox browser. So we went through the Christmas season with these increasingly loud calls to relax the rules on the board. And a lot of them, not all, there were a few honest, like actual Anon users who were regular users there who took some issue with the way we were enforcing things. But probably 70 or 80% of the complaints that we got were coming from these no post history, nobody mystery Anons coming onto the board. Come in, post once, maybe twice, disappear, never to be seen again. So we took to ignoring that at first, and then as it started to get worse, we began banning them. We didn't know exactly who it was or exactly why they were doing what they were doing, but it was pretty clear that they, to borrow the Southern vernacular, they weren't from around these parts. And so we started banning them like we would any other shill or troll that was coming onto the board. And a lot of the time, to kind of assuade the community for thinking, no, we're not actually banning people just for dissenting opinions, we would go in and screen cap their post history and post it. Like, here is everything this person has ever posted on our board, and it's 3 posts. One of them is yelling at the mods and calling us cucks, and 2 of them are demanding that the rules be relaxed. Not exactly your model image board citizens. So after a while, we just kind of wrote them all off as trolls and started, slap their post history up there, and then we'd ban the shit out of them. But at the same time, they were causing enough of a stir that we started to get actual calls for relaxing the moderation on the board. The campaign was having some success at convincing people. And so we began to do that. At first, we went from deleting certain topics and threads that were obviously trolls to just locking them, and we went from locking them to just saging them, or sage as the proper term is, basically bump locking them. And then after a while, it was to the point we really weren't doing anything at all. And the whole board had kind of gone to pot. So this was sort of the status quo, I want to say, in about February, when I had a conversation with Hot Wheels, the 8chan admin on Twitter. We'd noticed that the UIDs, our user count on the board, had been dropping for a while. And I was under the impression that 8chan was still tabulating its UID counts for the board based on active posts, which is how it was originally back before some of the software updates. And so some of the oldest, which were also the biggest threads on the board, were falling off the last page. And I figure, well, here's this 800 post thread full of all these UIDs that might not have posted, much since then, or they might have only been here in the beginning or changed IPs or something like that. That drops off and we lose some UIDs. No big deal. Well, Hot Wheels corrected me on that. He informed me that no, it was actually the UID count was tabulating data based on current active posts from only the most recent 3 days, I think it was. Meaning that we were actually hemorrhaging users at a ridiculous rate. I did a little bit of math and we were losing like 350 people a month. Which that was an honest to God, oh shit moment for me. So I sat down with the moderators and we had this big roundtable meeting. And we went over every possible thing that we could think of that might be causing people to leave the board. And yeah, I was in the running for that. It's like maybe Hatman fucked up massively. But the more we looked at it and the more we looked at it, and we looked at some of the complaints that we'd received and who we'd received them from, it didn't seem like the regular users on the board really had any problem with us. They were just kind of drifting away. And so finally, I made a unilateral decision, one of the few that I made without taking the, open consultation with the moderators. I said, we're going to clean the place up. The board looks like ass. We've got off-topic threads, Twitter drama, and just bullshit everywhere. Gamergate operations and digs that we try to run get buried off the first page within an hour. People are missing them. They're not posting in them. We don't have the boycott of the day thing anymore. We need to clean the place the fuck up. And maybe if the board looks nice and is running well and it's not full of shills and assholes being dicks to each other, maybe folks will want to come back. And so we said to hell with it. And that was where I came up with the idea for the quote-unquote purge. And that was kind of an interesting show. A lot of people don't know this, but I actually had Hot Wheels himself as the admin in the chat with us, watching us pull this whole thing off. Because there's a clause in the board ownership for 8chan that if you intentionally damaged or destroyed or fucked up your board in some malicious way, that the administrator could take your board from you. So I wanted to make sure that we did everything kind of on the kosher, and I actually invited Hot Wheels to come in and watch us while we planned and did this. Oh, I see what's happening with that microphone. Haha, problem solved. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, there we go. This thing has one of those little mute, unmute buttons built into the cord. I've been bumping it with my elbow without realizing it.
Ah, I see. No, but you've been able to speak just fine the whole time.
Okay, good. So anyway, we carried out the purge, which I made this great big deal out of it. I even made this sort of mega thread with, it was, what was it, Sabaton's nuclear attack with accompanying footage of B-29s dropping atomic bombs. The actual reality of what we did was we deleted about 6 pages worth of just crap threads from the catalog. And then anybody who popped up with these, the no post history, janitor copy pasta fucking spam and issues, or who tried to start a drama storm about it, just got the fucking ban hammer. We didn't give them any quarter on this one. It's like, if you're not here to do anything but complain about what the fuck we do, then you don't need to be here. And I think we banned a total of maybe 25 or 30 people by the time it was said and done. But at the end of it, the board did look really good, and we got rid of quite a few problem users. And the reason why I did it in such a dramatic way was I wanted this sort of hard stopping point that I could point back to in the board's history. It's people were used to rules lawyering with us. And I think you'll know what I mean by that.
Absolutely. That's why whenever we ever, my God, when we did rule changes, I would always make a conscious effort to try and make them as watertight as possible, because I did not want any rules lawyering. But
Yep.
that ended up backfiring on me because then some of those fucking people just went to outright lying about how we were enforcing the rules. So
And that's also exactly what happened to us. It was so bad that the post-purge rules list, I had to add a rule to make lying about the board, its rules and policies a bannable offense.
I think that's what we did too.
So we carried this whole thing out, and it actually did stem the user bleed. We went down from, I'm trying to remember how many UIDs we had at that point. I want to say it was in the mid 900 range. And the numbers kept ticking down, but we went from 370 something a month to like 20 people. And that was something I could easily chalk up to just regular old fashioned lack of interest. And so, in my opinion, we'd probably done the right thing. But during the purge, we had this faction split off from the main board who went running over to Pol. And as we found out later, this was the same faction that you guys had tangled with. It, some familiar names in there: Male Goddess, Swami, Wolfgar V. Heltzer, Thedrin. I don't know if QQ was involved at the time, but he's probably lurking around there somewhere like a bad smell. These were the anonymous posters who were over here in this poll thread getting the place set up. And they picked a name, which was GG Revolt. And they went through this big, long song and dance about how they were going to have a true anonymous board owner instead of the evil name fag from V, Acid Man, all this other stupid shit. So they went and they made their board. They went and they offered it to Thedrin, who was the leader of the IRC group at the time, who declined it. And we came to find out much later on that this whole thing was a dog and pony show. They went from Thedrin to the board owner of GG2, who was Zan, who was one of the streamers from the early days of GG, who was also tied in with this major IRC clubhouse cabal shit. Anyway, he became the interim board owner, while the actual owner was some, quote unquote, based anon that nobody knew anything about. Well, I'm sure you realize by now who exactly the board owner was. So anyway, Zan takes over the board. GG Revolt becomes a thing. Intanol, who Swami was involved with a little bit on and off, helped spam their board up into the top bar on the site. And so it became sort of a fight between Gamergate HQ and GG Revolt. And my words to the mods on it were to just concentrate on keeping board quality, kind of the thing that we always had done. That was what put us in line with GG in the first place when the original board contest was going on. It's like, if we take care of our board and they have this sort of anarchist utopia over here, they're going to collapse under their own weight and we should be just fine. Well,
I think I ended up throwing them a bone on KIA at one point. Someone had requested a sticky about the whole situation. They described it as a split. Yeah. So I said, okay, we'll do a sticky and we'll talk about GG Revolt there, but that's about it. Right. And I think somebody to fuck with them put GG Revolt in the sidebar at some point too.
Yeah, Revolt and I were both in the sidebar at one time.
Yeah. That didn't go over well.
Well, that all boils down to the one thing that GG Revolt found that they could offer in terms of being a Gamergate board that we refused to. And that was the ability to shit on and kind of attack other pro Gamergate members. Pro GG people on Gamergate HQ weren't above criticism, but there was kind of an expectation on the point of the moderators that you make a really good case if you're going to criticize somebody who's overtly pro GG. I mean, goddamn, think of the risks that people had to take back in the early days, especially if your name is known, just to come out and support us. And Revolt didn't give two shits about that. They were free speech to the point that you could basically operate what would be the best way to describe it? It would be like if the U.S. military, in accordance with the Constitution, was so pro-free speech that they would allow ISIS to build an encampment in the middle of a United States Army base. because they don't want to infringe upon ISIS's free speech. That's kind of the level of retarded that we were dealing with. In fact, I think I even described it in terms similar to that at least once. And because we sort of had, everything else related to Gamergate, operations, digging and such, working against journos, working against the media, keeping an eye on the SJW threat in the industry, on lockdown, that was already what we were doing. These guys kind of morphed into I don't even know what the fuck to describe it. Can you think of a good term?
Nope, I've got nothing.
Almost like a monkey on our back, but not quite. I don't know. They considered themselves to be nominally Gamergate, but they spent all their fucking time attacking other people in Gamergate.
I think shill would be probably the best word for it, but they were more like the divide and conquer shills.
Yeah, but they weren't really shilling for anybody that we ever found out, apart from themselves.
Well, Ralph.
Well, that kind of came later, though. I mean, there's a whole other involved story with that, including some details that I can't get into. But I don't know what the fuck you'd call them. I guess, you know what? How about
saboteurs?
Team killers.
Yeah, that works.
They were tired of playing on the regular team, tired of playing the same old map, so they started to get their jollies by TKing their teammates. I think that's probably the best way I can describe them. I could understand the hate that they had for me, because at least for most of the normal Anons who went over there in the initial migration, it was my actions that put them over there. But then you had them going after people like you, people like Cult of Vivian, people like Oliver Campbell and Sargon. And here's another interesting thing, though. Almost all the targets that GG Revolt went after were people who had kind of crossed paths with or offended or refused the advances of this stupid cabal operating in the IRC. And after a while, I got to the point of kind of wondering exactly who it was who was making those threads, targeting specific GG individuals over there all the time. I mean, we say things that, oh, you can post anonymously. It could be anybody. But when you look at means, motive, and opportunity, there's a certain list of names that keeps coming up repeatedly. And after a while, there was sort of a mounting body of evidence between, corroborating things that were discussed on Twitter between various members of the group, with what happened on GG Revolt, with what would happen on Baphomet, the doxing and trolling board that 8chan had for quite a while, which it still exists, but it's kind of dead now. And after a while, if you looked at it in the long term, a pattern sort of emerged, where you would see this IRC clique, this cabal, they'd put crosshairs on somebody. And the next thing you know, it would turn up on GG Revolt as a thread. And everybody would get riled up over there and start going after this person. And then a little while after that, suddenly a thread would pop up on Baphomet. Now this person's been doxxed. Here's their personal information. Here's all this other stuff about them. And then suddenly the thread on Baphomet gets linked back to the threads on GG Revolt. And the next thing you know, you have people being harassed off of social media, getting shit in the mail. Moderators on various sites are being doxxed, shit like that. But it became such a predictable pattern after a while in the order of events and the same names always popping up, that it started to become pretty obvious that there was something more going on. And I don't remember exactly when this was, probably about March-ish.
March, April.
Yeah, somewhere in that time zone. What the hell did they do? I think it was they doxed no, they didn't dox him. They attacked Oliver Campbell. I think it was John Kelly at the time. And this one was overt, because you had the stuff going down on Revolt, you had the stuff going down on Baphomet, you had the stuff going down on, I think they had cow threads too. But at the same time, they were overtly targeting Oliver from their own social media accounts. And it was a lot of the same talking points. And it wasn't always, the information might pop up on Revolt and then they would use it, but then also they would put out information that would pop up on Revolt at the same time. You could tell there was quite a bit of back and forth going on there. And this sort of network analysis picture emerged. And at that point, I realized that, this is kind of what we're dealing with. This is this organized group that they have their own social circle, they have their IRCs, they've got their Twitter DM groups and something like this. This is who's been fucking with us. This is who was fucking with us on the boards. This is who's been fucking with us on social media. Why? And after a while of this, Oliver actually got kind of pissed off and fed up, and he quit social media for a while, and that pissed me off. I like Oliver quite a bit. He's a really good guy, especially if you talk to him in private. He's got a little bit of a temper when he gets super riled up about stuff, but he's just a pretty great dude in general.
Yeah, nothing but good things to say about him.
Yeah, and this was around the same time frame that they managed to finally dox me. And I decided I had to make a judgment call. It's like, okay, so I can do the smart thing and I can transfer board ownership to somebody else and I can pack up my bags and disappear quietly into the night. Or I can throw two middle fingers up and I can deal with this fucking problem because I've already been hit. I can take the hits. And I sat down and I have a little circle of friends. We still kind of keep in touch, but they were privy to some of this shit that was going on at the same time. Mostly unrelated to V, fortunately. Anyway, we started doing analysis on this stuff. Like, who talks to who really talks to who? Not just looking at sort of general pictures on social media, but like digging into these people and where they meet and what they do. And I got mad enough, I finally put out a docs call on Gamergate HQ. First and only time I've ever done that. I said, there's this group of guys who are fucking with us. Here's my email address. Anybody who wants to, who has it, send me anything and everything you have on them. And a couple, 3 days later, I had my first leaker come out. And this guy was a member of the group who was a little bit less than thrilled at the way his buddies had been conducting themselves. And on the condition of protecting their anonymity and making sure that, basically that I didn't dox them in the process of going through this whole thing, they gave me chat logs, they gave me DM histories, they gave me timelines of events. They pointed me to two other people who also were able to corroborate the same information. And then the most important one, and this is a small leak that I'm going to make, Alexander Macris, better known as Archon from The Escapist, was one of the people who was named at having been invited into one of these secret IRC rooms that these assholes were running. I happen to know Archon. We spoke several times via Twitter DM, especially in the early days. And so I contacted him and I said, hey, this is the information that I've got. Can you verify that this shit all happened? And he did. He remembered the IRC chat and was even able to recognize partially some of the names of people that I ran by him. Hey, was this guy in there? Was this guy in there? His memory was a little bit fuzzy, but he had the details down that matched what my insiders had told me. So it's like, okay, we've got some verification of this shit. And so it was right about that same time where the whole FBI thing fucking happened. And I can actually talk about that now because both of the major players who were involved with it have since retired from their respective agencies. I had a regular customer of mine for years who worked at the local police department. He actually stopped by my store and kind of, a little bit of a wink and a nudge, you didn't hear this from me kind of thing, said, you might want to check some stuff out. We're getting some weird reports from people. And so I did. And that was the night that I learned that I'd been doxxed. And how did it go? I'm trying to remember the order because it was like 3 o'clock in the fucking morning. I got home from work and I started poking around, and I think it was on Baphomet, where my docs had suddenly popped up. And there was a bunch of people in the thread, some of them very recognizable, both by posting styles and the fact that the dipshits always reused the same image macros. That was how we identified a couple of the people that were in there. Was God damn it, the original file names that you save an image as from an image board site are persistent. If you post that picture on one site, it's going to have a unique image tag, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.jpg. And you can see that same image with that same randomized file name posted elsewhere. You can link that person together. And we were actually able to get into this doxing thread that was going on about me. It's like, oh, well, here's this son of a bitch from the IRC group, and here's another of these son of a bitches from the IRC group. And so we tied them in with that too. They were the ones pushing for that. And finally, the guys on the Baphomet thread put out a SWAT call, and that was the point where shit kind of hit the fan. So I called my buddy over at the local PD, and I actually described to him what the hell was going on. They called him in on night shift, and they sent another officer down, not him himself, who came down and talked to me at my place. And I actually showed him on my smartphone. I scrolled the thread. Here's what the fuck they're doing. You know, if you guys get any weird calls tonight, which they did, to ignore it. And they put a bulletin out and everything and kind of covered me on that. Well, I go back to work, and a couple of days later, I get a phone call from a fellow who works for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who'd been a customer of mine for probably 7 or 8 years. And he says that my name had turned up, had been sent in to them on an anonymous tip. And he said it sounded like it was some bullshit, but he thought he better talk with me about it. So he came down to the shop, and I actually, I pulled 8chan up on my work computer, and I showed him the fucking threads, like all of them. I showed him the threads on Revolt. I showed him the threads on Baphomet. We archived them on archive.today. I emailed him links to the archives. And he said, you know what, if you know so much about the people who are putting this all together, just gather all the information that you can on them. And we have this cyber crimes division, guys who specialize in this type of stuff. I'll show you where to go, take that information over to them, and if they can find something there, we'll investigate it. I said, okay. So we did that, and there was this about 2 or 3 week long just mass digging escapade that we did into everybody that we could find who was involved with that IRC cabal. Thedron, Cuckoo, Seattle for Truth, all that kind of shit. Basically anybody and everybody. Burning the forest down to catch the bandit was the descriptor that I used. So I took him up there to that Kansas City office, and I dropped him off on a thumb drive. And then we came back, and I had an IRC chat session a couple of days later that I invited the members of the Cabal and GG Revolt to. It's called Predator Chat. And I could actually put a link up in the chat for anybody who wants to read the original unedited logs, but it's some pretty nasty shit. There was overt threats in there. There was covert threats in there. I was making some threats of my own, too, particularly related to the whole FBI investigation deal. And then I waited about 2 weeks, and we had this, the bomb drop thread on Gamergate HQ, which is where I made a public announcement of the FBI's involvement and posted some stuff to prove that it was actually happening, including a neat little picture that I took of their main office lobby had this Federal Bureau of Investigation sign on it. I stuck some Post-it notes on it with their names on the fucking thing, and they let me take a picture. And just like I figured they would, after that, they flipped the fuck out on Twitter. I had this imagined fantasy of like hard drives going into microwaves all over the United States. You know what I mean?
Oh, dear God.
That was my payback, was running their blood pressure up through the fucking roof. But it also drew enough attention to it that I was able to expose what I did know was going on. And that was when the whole, I think it was about the time the Cancer Crew meme started on 8chan. And all of these guys wound up being fucking pariahs. Kelly, somehow the only one who maintained any sort of decent PR front, I think, was Cuckoo, mostly because he stayed the fuck out of it.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know how many alts Male Goddess got himself banned under
on fucking
KIA.
God.
Yeah, like all of those guys on social media and on fucking all the Gamergate hubs. They became fucking lepers everywhere outside of GG Revolt itself. And yeah, that was kind of the worst part was I couldn't brag about it. I needed to let them stew. I wanted that paranoia to be there, to just get under their fucking skin and burn into their brain. That was my payback. So I had to keep my damn mouth shut about all the details of it for a super long time. In fact, even now, there's things that I still can't say. Things that were said and things that were done and people that were talked to. But yeah, that was kind of the story of GG Revolt. It split off from Gamergate HQ. They were team killers against the rest of Gamergate, with very few exceptions. And the place was ran, and most of their major like operations and stuff were actually done by this retarded IRC cabal who thought they were the Gamergate Illuminati. And then they ran into a fucking autistic board owner who turned their own little FBI reporting gambit back on them. And now they hate me forever and ever. The end.
But there were some names that popped up, and I know we sort of cross-checked them with our own notes. Like Invisible Jim was one of the big ones.
I remember him. Who the fuck else? Hang on a second. I got notes of my own. Oh shit! I made a mistake opening this file.
Oh shit!
No, I opened my. I need to open my text editor and go in from the outside. My main Gamergate folder is like 6 terabytes.
Holy shit!
Yeah, if that tries to load, it'll completely crash my computer. Hang on a second here. Text editor. So anyway, among other things, I doxed every member of the group and actually handed their docs over to the FBI. Here we go. Open. Now we go into the Gamergate folder. Show text files only. Where is it?
I think it's my Gamergate folder. I'm curious now.
They're in the subfolder.
250 megabytes.
Let's see. Where is it? I got so much shit in here. They're in a sub. They're still in a subfolder marked faggots. It's like one of my helpers with this was joking about it. It's like 2 FBI agents staring over a computer. It's like, quick, check the faggots folder, Johnson. We've got to catch these assholes. Oh, where the hell is it? I can't remember what I titled it as. It was just a bunch of notes that I took while I was interviewing these leakers. Ah, here it is. Let's see. Who else did we have? There's a few names in here.
John Kelly, Thidrin, Ethics Suck, Bacon from Hell, Jim.
Yeah, those guys.
Mel Goddess, Koro, Oppressed Fart.
Here we go. Moltar, Drybones,
yep.
Sail Hayton, Hessmix, Marbug Chan, Synthovine.
Hessmix?
Yep.
Interesting. He was a KIA mod.
Yeah, for a while I knew that KIA actually had one of their members on your guys' mod team.
He was always a pretty cool guy, though. Still talk to him from time to time.
Oh yeah, that's right. Hot Wheels was in the group. Listed mostly inactive. Zingar.
Yep.
Let's see, somebody named Red Queen. A couple others going on in here. But yeah, I got basically the complete history of most of the group, how they started, their own little splits and internal dramas. John Kelly, Ethics Suck, the guy who started the Ethics Cook meme. Yeah, there was a whole fucking pack of these guys.
Silver Ranger, Raziel.
Yeah.
Seattle for Truth, of course.
Yeah, Seattle apparently, according to what I was told, he got brought into the group to become their new sort of videos and presentation guy after Bacon from Hell left. But yeah, the what we have here is a clique of faggots with an extremely unwarranted sense of self-importance who caused a lot of trouble for everybody in Gamergate. And as far as to answer the question that was in the chat earlier, what they actually were hoping to accomplish, I don't fucking know. I don't think they knew. Every time I got a leaker from the group, or I was actually able to have a semi-cordial conversation with one of them, I always made sure to ask them the question of what the hell is the end game of all of this? Like whether it's, whether it's Thedrin, who's kind of the, I don't have any hard proof on it that I can present, but is sort of the ringleader of the whole thing. He always owns the venues and shit like that. Everywhere you look, he hangs around like a bad smell. Whether somebody calling the shots had a goal for all of this, or whether it was just dogs chasing cars. I came up with a theory a long time after. In fact, it was only a few months ago as to why they put so much emphasis on taking hold of the 8chan boards. Like, these guys were trying to get control of the hub when it shifted. They got control of both of the previous Gamergate boards by co-opting the owners. They tried to co-opt me. I turned down 3 different invitations to join their little IRC club. Um, I couldn't figure out why. It's like, we're an image board on 8chan. Like, KIA is 10 times the size of us, even back at our peak. It's like, why the fuck do they care so much about us? But then I clicked that it had to do with information distribution. And my theory was, because the way the flow of information would usually start in V, and then it would move to Gamergate HQ as kind of a proving ground. And then once it was proven and tweaked there, it would be taken over to KIA by our Reddit cross posters. And it would get blown up over there a whole bunch and then disseminated out onto social media through the major Twitter accounts and things like that. We had a pretty good information network, Gamergate did. And I realized that if you controlled the first step, you couldn't really co-opt it. They couldn't get into the V threads. We're basically pretty shill-proof. There's about 110 people in there, and we all kind of know each other, and we all kind of know what's normal and what's not. So the wolf in sheep's clothing bit doesn't really work on us. And KIA was just too fucking big. If you wanted to try and control the information that was flowing out of KIA, there's no way that you could do it without actually controlling the moderator slots.
Well, I think there was a goal with that, and I think that's basically what it was: change the ideology of KIA, change the audience there.
Right.
I thought of it as at first as people were throwing a bitch fit because they wanted karma for their posts. I thought, oh my god, they just want the attention, they want the reputation. But it was a little bit deeper than that. This happened around the time of the self-post rule, where if you had any content that was not immediately related to gaming or nerd culture, then you had to have it in a self-post explaining why it was relevant to the interests of Gamergate and
right. I
why people should give a damn.
Like, I don't know about your guys' karma rules and all that shit. I have a Reddit account, but I use it very little. But I do vaguely remember that event, though.
Yeah. Well, basically with the karma thing is people tend to take someone more seriously with the more karma they have. It's basically like e-penis level.
See, this is one of the reasons why image board users consider Reddit to be cancerous. I just want to point that out.
Yeah, well, you're really not wrong on that front. But anyway, so we made that a rule, and the big stink was you're relegating all this shit to second-class content, whereas this was what we saw as a compromise to allow stuff like unrelated social justice content, like the Matt Taylor incident and the fucking "Are you Beachbody ready?" controversy.
Oh yeah,
yeah. What we would allow that, but in that sort of capacity. And one of the talking points that kept coming up was self-posts don't do as well in karma, so we won't have as good of a chance to reach our all, which was a conglomeration of the top posts on Reddit at the time, which KIA was regularly hitting. And at first I thought, okay, so this is just a karma thing. They're going to lose their influence because they won't get as much post-karma from their shit. But then it just sort of dawned on me that no, what they wanted to do was push this content to the top of our all, bring in more people that saw KIA as more of a, who agreed with it or saw KIA as a anti-SJW general sub that they could just, dump all their shit in, and basically run out the people who were in it for, the typical reasons that they were for Gamergate, the ethics and the gaming shit.
Right. I think I would agree with that, actually.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
What had dawned on me is if you managed to get control of that middle step, if you had control of the 8chan hub, then you could filter what information was passed from V, where a lot of our operations and stuff were conceived, before it got to KIA, which was kind of the major megaphone that we had that introduced Gamergate's ideas and content to a lot of new people and a lot of, Redditor normies, quote unquote. It's like if you have a multi-step amplifier and you change the voltage at the second plate, you can have a massive effect on the output voltage at the end without having to put in nearly as much work. You don't have as much information flow to control. You can make a lot more subtle movements that are harder to pick up on just by sage flooding or bumping the correct threads at the correct time while also broadcasting them from major social media accounts. There's actually a surprisingly large amount of power that you can exert over the whole GG information network just by controlling the little board on 8chan. And that when that dawned on me, it kind of smacked me upside the head. And it's like, I cannot think of a better reason why they fought so fucking hard to try and get control of us.
Yeah, and it was more or less the same thing with controlling vote totals on KIA. When you could clearly see the vote score, we noticed that people were more likely to go with whatever had the highest vote total at the time. And so we noticed that there was coordination between the usual suspects who would post this shit, railing against the mods, calling us cucks and saying we needed to go, we were abusing the rules or whatever. And within minutes, they would have like 10 or 12 upvotes. And if we ever came in to fire back at them or try to address some of the criticisms that other people were leveling at us, we would instantly get those 10, 12 downvotes.
Mm-hmm. In fact, I'll tell you something interesting. Those notes I was talking about earlier, one of the entries in here was that what I was told from the insider is that their teams that they had that went around bumping or saging certain threads and influencing vote totals was between 12 and 20 people.
Makes sense. Mm-hmm. Makes sense with exactly the things we observed. But yeah, so there was that, and there was also lots of rules lawyering. So one user in particular, I mentioned him last night. Well, actually, no, it was two users. One of them actually, I believe, got his account suspended on Reddit, and that was Invisible Jim. But the other one was based iCloud. And this guy would push the rules as far as they could possibly go. He was outright lying about how we would enforce them. If we ever had a new thread about new changes that we were implementing in the sub, he was always there, always railing about how we were abusing our powers and how myself and Manos Lemons and Gamma King and Porygon Z Guy all needed to step down. And later that expanded to Chaos as well, which kind of funny because in our private chats, we wanted to ban this guy like really bad. We knew that it was going to be a stretch of the rules, but we wanted this guy out because he was good for nothing except stirring shit. And Chaos was very adamant about not banning him, to the point where when it actually did happen, Chaos threw a fucking fit and demanded to know who the hell did it. And I think it was actually Manos Lemons who did, but that's now they're... Well, actually, no. I suppose I should talk about that because rules lawyering...
Before you go into it real hard, let me pause for just a second because I got to use the little boys' room. I will be right back.
With that pause, I will talk to the chat a little bit then.
All right. Be right back.
Leave it on a cliffhanger. So how is everyone doing? I'm doing okay. If you don't know what's going on here, talking with Acid Man. Acid Man is the board owner of Gamergate HQ on 8chan. Has been since the board was created. Basically reminiscing on the old days and talking about shit that happened. You could sort of consider this a continuation of last night's stream about Gamergate, KIA, why I quit, things that happened, that sort of thing. And the big point of this is Acid Man hasn't really gone on streams much, if ever. So everybody needs to not bully, please. Oh god. So, rules lawyers, huh? Talking about yellow space rock and fucking Myers. Plus a Rocky Dennis fag. Um, though, so all the Myers posting stuff came like much, much later on. The stuff we're talking about was like 2.5 to 3 years ago. So this is way, way before all that in internet terms. Like some of the people that we're talking about have had their Reddit accounts banned for that long, or some of them have gone off of Twitter or had those accounts banned for a long time. Like actually, let me see if John Kelly is still on Twitter. I think he got suspended. Nope. This account's tweets are protected. Looks like he deleted everything because he's got the default avatar. Let's see. There was another one. Oppressed fart. I believe they were suspended. Nope, not suspended. Oh well, holy shit! Somewhat active. Last thing posted was July 7th, though. Something in German. Looks like pretty much given up on Gamergate. Now it's more of a Trump train sort of account. Don't know why people are still following them. Let's see. Let me find another one. Verilo. Verilo was suspended.
And I'm back.
Oh, what's up?
Not much. I feel about 2 gallons lighter.
Oh, good. Everything came out okay.
Yeah. I fell in, but I didn't flush.
I was just going over accounts that I knew were a part of GG Revolt, or at least sympathetic to them, and talking about which ones were still around and which ones were banned.
Oh, that's an interesting little piece of history I can chime in on. I see John Kelly and Verilo both getting mentioned.
Yep. John Kelly looks like he deleted everything.
Yeah, they did not get doxxed by GG Revolt. They got doxxed by Wolfgar V. Heltzer, a.k.a. Koro on Twitter. He was kind of Thedron's hitman. There was a stream. Again, you'll have to forgive me if my timing is off on this. It's been a while. But probably about 5 or 6 months after they doxed me, Verilo and Thedron were on a stream together. And Verilo pissed Thedron off. And he lost his shit and was screaming at Verilo at the top of his lungs right on the stream. Shortly after that, Thedron basically declared Verilo excommunicatus from their little clubhouse. And my understanding is that when John Kelly took Verilo's side, Thedron kicked him out as well. Once they were out of the group, though, it was actually Wolfgar/Koro who went after both of them. And he was still part of Thedron's group, so this, my intonation of it was always that he did this on Thedron's say-so. And he actually doxed both of them and harassed them both pretty extensively. There was multiple threads on GG Revolt, on Baphomet, on Cow, and basically tried to drive these guys off of the internet for offending his lord and master Thedron. It wasn't a general GG Revolt thing. It was just this one particular autist, who, as you're probably aware with old Wolfgar, he's a freaking autistic Canadian black dude. Furry. The guy was so cancerous he got ran out of the Encyclopedia Dramatica forums. Let that sink in. But yeah, he was the guy who did in old John Kelly and Verilo.
Looks like Thedron is still somewhat active on Twitter.
He is. He and Cuckoo are two of the last ones left.
Yeah, I noticed Cuckoo retweeting some old, or not old shit, but new shit that I've
Yeah,
posted
Wolfgar
politics
v.
related.
Heltzer was Sir Wolfington,
Sir
aka Koro.
Wolfington.
Yep, those were his three names. Fun fact: he also put up a alt board on 8chan, trying to get people out of the main Gamergate board back in the day too. He created Gamergate HB for Gamergate Home Base.
I remember that.
Yeah,
Good God, I've not heard that in a long time.
Yep, he wanted to be the board owner so bad.
Space Cat Boy is one I remember. I don't know if he changed names or
I vaguely
deleted.
remember that guy.
Let's see. Christie Jr. He was one of Ralph's guys.
Yeah, he's on Gab these days. He's also one of the head honchos of the Vote Gamergate board. I think his
Yeah,
name there is
looks like.
Xeno Chris.
Yes, that I recognize Xenochris. And looks like he got suspended on Twitter too. Let's see. Of course, Male Goddess is under a different name.
Yeah.
Like the 11th fucking one.
Well, when you're part of a subgroup whose main thought leaders seem to consistently wind up in prison for anything from punching police officers to murder, it doesn't surprise me that most of the lesser ones would wind up getting their Twitter accounts suspended.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. So anyway, back to where we were. Based iCloud.
Yeah.
Rules lawyering. Basically, everything he did was just barely within line of all the rules that we had set. In order to curb that sort of behavior and the behavior of the other names that we had noted, such as, I'll just go ahead and read some off the list here because I know some people last night were asking me about it. Javier Core, Mental Gen O, Male Goddess was on that list, Invisible Gem, Team Complete Control, Death Battle Fan 123, Dr. Diagoras, and if I'm butchering these names, fuck it at this point. And of course, Thidran was
Thidrani.
there. Yes, or Thoradin.
I don't think that was him. I thought that was somebody else.
Well, there were a lot of them that were spelled very, very differently, but all running along the same sort of conventions. But anyway, point being, these were people that we were watching out for, and a lot of the time, if they ever commented in the thread where we were present, it was almost always attack or the rules are shit, you are shit, get out. You're not the leaders of Gamergate, you're janitors. That is your role.
Right.
Oh, dear God. So, we changed the rules up in an attempt to basically purge these sorts of people. But we had to make them as airtight as possible because we didn't want anyone rules lawyering to get around it. But we had made an exception, or not really an exception, but we had made a note in one of the rules where if you are intentionally lying about how we apply this shit, that was grounds for a ban. And sure enough, Base iCloud took the bait and started lying about how we were applying the rules. So he got a ban on that one. I wasn't around when that happened. I had just gotten into the Skype call, or not Skype call, Skype chat, since that's where we're basically discussing stuff, and we would always vote on bans.
I'm gonna just drop something into the chat here real quick.
Go for it. If it's a link, be very careful because Google
it's a paste bin link to the complete logs of that chat that I had with these guys right before the whole FBI thing happened.
Yeah, just put some spaces in between the dots and the com and all that shit. so it'll post because Google's an asshole.
Gotcha.
But anyway, so he ended up getting banned and immediately went over to subreddit cancer, which was a sub that really didn't like a lot of what KA was doing at the moment. And a lot of the usual suspects ran around there too. And it was basically a house where you could spray paint censorship as much as possible, and people would call it art. So he immediately went over there, rallying about how it was so terrible, he was specifically targeted, and the mods were cucks. And almost immediately came right back over to KIA, unbanned based iCloud. Why did you ban him? You know, this is terrible. What the fuck are you doing? So I get a text from one of the other mods saying, dude, you need to get in the Skype chat right now. Shit's going down. And sure enough, that's the drama that I come to. Chaos is pissed because he wants to know who the fuck banned based iCloud. Someone had owned up to it. I think it was Mano, and I think he had the approval of Gamma King and someone else too. I think it was Porygon Z guy. But a whole bunch of fucking drama, and eventually we just said, you know what? The board is going to burn the fuck down if we don't do something. Let's just make it a temp ban, and that's it. We'll go from there. And I think he ended up getting permabanned again not long after that, to which he tried to raise hell again, but eventually people stopped giving a fuck about him. But that incident was one where we basically fucked up and did exactly what he wanted us to do, and gave
they were good about that.
Gave the Cabal all the ammo that they could have possibly wanted about you're banning people based on failings and whatnot. And I think part of their strategy on top of that was basically make life hell for the mods there.
Until you moderate them, and then use that as ammunition against you.
Yeah.
They used to do the same thing to us. They'd come in and they'd make a post talking about a controversial subject. And the subject that they were talking about might be perfectly fine, not against the board rules at all. But they'd make the thread with just an incredibly inflammatory OP. It's like, all right, you know, the first sentence out is, listen up, you fucking cucks. I know you're too busy sucking your own dicks or whatever, but take a look at this if you're not a bunch of faggots type of thing. And they'd make the posts so inflammatory that it would start a flame war. And so it'd go on for a little bit, and finally we'd come in and we'd moderate that thread, lock it or delete it, or, you know, if it was a repeated pattern, we'd ban the OP. And about 10 minutes later, they'd be back over on GG Revolt or on Poll, posting screen caps of their ban message, claiming that they were banned and it was censorship because we just didn't like the ideas that they were presenting. Mm-hmm. Nothing to do with the shitstorm that they were trying to stir up in the way that they presented it.
Censorship was their trigger word.
Yeah, it's argument absence of context. And the part that I always found frustrating was how well it worked on some people.
Well, yeah, all they had to do was say, we're being censored. The mods are going down the same route as the janitors and the mods on 4chan. Or they have been infiltrated. That was another line I saw very frequently. And you're still seeing it today on KIA. The mod team has been infiltrated by SJWs.
Oh, they accused us of having our mod team infiltrated by Redditors. They thought that some of your mods were also my mods.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. The only board that I ever at least tried to moderate on 8chan was the Kotaku in Action board, the Kia board.
Which
And
that actually might need to come into use here in the not too distant future. The way Reddit's getting their head up their ass again.
yeah, wouldn't um wouldn't be a bad idea to grab control of that again, because I think I lost it, but fuck it.
Was it slash KIA slash?
I think it was.
Yeah, yeah, I vaguely remember that.
Yeah,
Hell,
didn't last very long.
we took in the refugees from Fat People Hate for a while until Vote opened up their subscriptions.
Oh Jesus God.
Yep. In fact, that actually
Oh,
caused
I
quite a
remember that.
row on 8chan. Fat People Hate came to 8chan and started a board, and then fucking Intinol, the international board, who was this just retarded anarcho communist asshole board. I don't know. We wound up spamming their whole board into oblivion with Buffalo. Somebody did B or BNV, B or V. I'm not sure who all was involved, but it was nice to come home and see that day. Um, they actually raided Fat People Hate to try and drive people out, just because they didn't want 8chan to grow.
God, I remember Fat People Hate. Tumblr in Action had to deal with a lot of that shit too, and eventually we just had to put a stop to it. You still got to follow the rules before you rage on about ham planets.
Yeah. Well, the problem that we have with fucking Reddit is that the rules aren't enforced fairly. Just
No.
I know you're probably not the world's biggest fan of the Donald, but I lurk there because it's kind of a fun place to be a lot of the time. And just the amount of shit that they get from the Reddit admins, the vote fixing, the quarantining from R all, the general, like, every time you hear the admins talk about them in any of the blog posts and stuff they do, they're practically groveling an apology for even allowing them to exist.
What do you want to know about how the admins feel about that?
Oh,
Because
I heard some little quips on your stream from yesterday after I got the chance to
oh no no
download
no,
it.
this is stuff that I don't think I've actually talked about before.
Oh, by all means, go ahead.
So before Reddit changed their whole algorithm on new accounts and what subs they'd be subscribed to, they had a list of default subreddits where every new account would be subscribed to it. You might remember that our atheism was one of those at one point.
I don't. To
And
be honest, the only reason my Reddit account exists was to post on KIA, and like I lurk a couple of game related forums in the Donald.
hmm, well, that was something that happened a few years back, and you would oftentimes hear people say, "I made an account just so I could not see our atheism on my front page," because the default Reddit front page from people that weren't logged in were also from all the default subs.
Okay.
So when we added Manos Slimmons as a mod to KIA, he and I sort of got close, and I sent him some shit, some Winnipeg Jets shit that I found Disney World for him, because he's a huge Jets fan, and he ended up asking me to mod our Jokes with him. And Jokes just happened to be a default sub at the time. So as a result of that, I got into the default mods subreddit, which was private, very exclusive. I'm talking like 500 users or less, and all these people were. If you frequent Reddit, you'd recognize a lot of the names there. But that's where also they would have communications with the admins. This was different from Mod Talk. Mod Talk was a different sub that had shit leak out from there, courtesy of Xavier Mendel.
Yeah, I
But this one,
recall that.
yeah, but this one was a little bit more exclusive, because it wasn't just a you have to be invited. It was you have to be or have been a moderator of a default sub in order to even know that the damn place existed. I didn't know it existed until I got that message saying, "Oh, you're now an approved contributor." Holy shit! Okay. Eventually, they moved from that board to a Slack channel, and I still have access to it to this day. I don't know what exactly the rules are for it since they got rid of the default subs with the new algorithm for, hey, if you make a new account, you can pick which subs that you're subscribed to based on your interests, but we won't automatically sub you to anything. So I have no idea, really, like if this gets as much use as it should. But I know that the admins still frequent this. There's a whole channel for communicating with admins, such as requesting bans, requesting checks to see if people are bot accounts, uh, ban evasion, all that shit. And occasionally you would see people talking about the Donald in there. And I'll just look at this right now. Um, in the admin comms, as of 5 o'clock yesterday, Eastern time, I believe, they were talking about the Donald posting links based on the Texas church shooting.
Uh-huh.
There's a Boston bomber situation starting up. The sub is about to start a witch hunt against a random person who is unrelated, and an admin is in there right away. I'm going to poke them momentarily, but you see this sort of thing very frequently. People are watching the Donald, looking for anything that they can use to hit them. And at one point, there was actually an impassioned plea by, I believe the user was All the Foxes, asking the admins to ban the Donald because the sub was basically becoming too much of a liability for Reddit as a whole, and there was a risk that they would end up causing, if not real world trauma to somebody, they would end up basically being complicit in someone being killed.
Lovely.
And
So not like all the Antifa Reddits with their bike locks and bash the fash.
yeah, well, all those Reddits are private now for very obvious reasons. But yeah, and on occasion you'll see big stuff like that in the default mods Slack. So why the admins are still allowing the Donald to exist, I don't know, because pretty much everyone that I've seen talk about them there has made it pretty clear that they don't want the Donald to be a thing. But
Well,
the current state of the rules means that they have to allow them.
let me contribute a little theory on that. Um, what do you recall happened when 4chan banned Gamergate from V?
8chan.
Not just 8chan. We used to have a word for it. We called it Twitter-chan.
Oh, God. I'd forgotten about that.
Yep. We invaded their fucking hug box with an army from hell, and they have never been the same since. They I think an Anon in the V threads put it best when he said they broke the spaghetti container and it spilled out all over the internet.
Not wrong.
That is probably what the Reddit admins are trying to avoid. In a way, the fact that the Donald is so goddamn rowdy, to use the polite term, presents a kind of passive, credible threat of mass destruction if they ever actually ban their board. Because all of that content is going to go somewhere. All of the hypothetical 6 million users that are in that place are going to go somewhere to talk about those issues. And that somewhere will probably mean the end of our politics as a functional subreddit, as well as many other places on Reddit.
As
I
if our politics wasn't already fucked to begin with.
It is, but it's liberal fucked.
Yeah,
You know,
correct the record, fucked.
yeah. No, when they're putting up, I've browsed it just long enough to see some threads on there popping up actually linking Share Blue articles,
Oh, Jesus
and it's
God.
just like fuck that, fuck you. Clicking the back button now.
Well, share Blue, correct the record. What the fuck is the difference?
Not much. One's Hillary Clinton, the other's David Brock.
Remember, David Brock helped found Correct the Record.
I did not recall that, but thank you for reminding me.
Yep.
You know, it's weird, isn't it? It's like life is a fractal. You know, it's. I'm a firm believer in the butterfly effect, where every little choice that you make in how you live your life and engage with things can have like massive ramifications in the biggest of the big picture. And you can follow these little water droplets flowing down the fractal before they fall off the edge and land who knows where. And it only takes a little nudge here and there, especially near the beginning of an event happening, to wildly change the way its outcome is.
Chaos theory.
Chaos theory and catastrophe theory. And just think back 3 years. Did you ever expect we would fucking be here?
No. No, I did not. To be perfectly honest, I thought there'd be more achievements in Gamergate.
Well, this is my philosophy on that, and it actually comes right back to what I was saying a minute ago. Let me use a firearms analogy. You can have a gun that shoots straight as an arrow, and you point it at a target that's 10 feet away. You fire a bullet, and it hits exactly where you're aiming at. You fire at a target 10 miles away, or 10,000 yards away, say. The tiniest little imperfection in the barrel, the tiniest little nudge against that bullet at the start of its journey is going to throw it off by dozens of feet by the time it traverses all that distance going down there. Small changes that happen early on in an event over a long period of time have massive effects. And I think that's one of the few credible arguments that you can really make that Gamergate led to something like Trump. We joke about it. It's a meme. God knows the freaking SJW media likes blaming us for it so they can rope all their boogeymen into one nice little picnic basket. But I think the reality is that we kind of grabbed the system and we shoved it hard. We kicked it in the fucking balls. And we're not going to see results in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years. But the SJWs and their cultural Marxist ilk didn't accomplish all of this in 2 or 3 years either. The long march through the institutions is I'm going to quote Styx Hexenhammer for a minute. It's leaning harder to one side than a one-legged unicyclist doing 90 down the Autobahn because we fucking shoved it that way. And it's a matter of patience, really, I think. Like, we get blamed for everything. Gamergate is still a almost daily fixture in the media somewhere.
Living rent-free.
Yes. You cannot say with a straight face that we have not had a major impact. We may not know what that impact is because we're not inside the loop on all of these quasi-governmental, corporate, ideological, academic shenanigans going on throughout the world. We try to be, but we have a absence of diggers these days. We don't know how big it is, and we don't know how big it's going to get. It's still progressing. It's still spiraling. It's it's probably not even going to end during our lifetime. And that being said, there's also a lot of little concrete things that the KIA guys and, no offense, but somebody like you who's kind of pulled back from a lot of it aren't going to know about. I mean, hell, V is still active. The Gamergate threads have never stopped. We pushed Operation Torrential Downpour, pushing for better localization in games. This was just some number of months ago, and that caught. We're running operations against Treehouse. I'm not sure exactly how the whole localization issue got worked into our core goals over there, but it did, and there's been a lot of progress on it. Um, just a lot of little things like that. There's still day-to-day stuff that's happening. It's just not the massive explosions of, whoa, holy shit, it's happening, that we had for that first, 8 or 12 months that this thing kicked off.
I suppose still, given that it's been now 3 years since the start, that the effects would at least be a little more visible than Kotaku begrudgingly offering their disclosures
Well,
mid article.
here's what I'll point out on that. It's not the concrete thing that Kotaku did in begrudgingly admitting their potential ethical violations in their articles. It's Kotaku's entire state of being. I'm not sure how old you are, but I've gotten the impression that you're one of the little bit older crowd, kind of like I am. You
25.
Okay? You're still probably old enough to remember when Kotaku was a somewhat respected publication.
Yes, I do.
Okay, what is Kotaku's reputation today? Everywhere, not just with us.
The opposite of that.
Exactly. We did that. Gamers, kind of the hardcore crowd, already knew that sites like Kotaku and Polygon were shit. We'd known it for a good number of years. The last time I think Kotaku was good, I was still in fucking college. But now it's mainstream. They know. This is the analogy that I used on 8chan here, probably in a discussion maybe a month ago. I said Gamergate died in the same way that a cell that's infected with Ebola dies. It ceases its internal function, and then the husk busts open, releasing the virus into the bloodstream to flood the entire system. They may not use our hashtag, but Gamergate's memes and our way of thinking have spread all over the internet. The gaming communities were the catalyst for this. Everybody's a gamer. The guy who makes your fucking pizza at Papa John's is a gamer. Vin Diesel plays video games. Mr. T did commercials for World of Warcraft. Okay, your grandmother plays Candy Crush. Everybody is either part of or connected to somebody by word of mouth who plays fucking video games. And our ideas went mainstream in the gamer community and spread like wildfire. You don't need to use the hashtag to shit on Kotaku. You can pop into a Kotaku thread today on any gaming forum, and you'll find people who have never heard of Gamergate shitting all over them. We did that. We might not have a flag to raise at Iwo Jima, but we caused a paradigm shift. And that's something I think we are perfectly free to claim credit for and enjoy.
Well, one other thing I suppose we're responsible for, the FCC guidelines.
Yep.
That, I think that is especially a big achievement because...
Well, I mean, hell,
now
in the Freedom of Information Act requests that we got back, didn't they cite both Kotaku in action threads and links to deep freeze?
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. But considering now the rise in half-fall, I guess, of YouTube personalities, all that branded content, that's pretty huge.
Yeah, this is also the force of the Empire striking back. They would not be targeting people like PewDiePie if they did not understand what a threat they are in the current environment. Like, we're issuing not exactly issuing, mouth's getting dry. I'm trying to find a proper term here. We kind of ushered in a new era. I'm going to go on a little bit of a quick diatribe here just to kind of give you the background to my thinking. But I used to read a lot of history and philosophy books when I was young. I was a kid, grew up out in the country. Television had 4 channels. My mother hated video games, so I didn't get to play them until I was like 16. I read a lot. And I came up with this. I had a question. Hat, describe real quick. Give me a 1-sentence description of a king.
Can I use a Game of Thrones quote.
No, just be as boring and bland as you can. First thing
Oh
that comes
damn.
to mind.
Uh, an individual who rules over a large populace, uh, not democratically chosen.
Okay. Can you describe him? What's he look like?
Gold, lots of gold. Obviously, crown,
There,
because
there you
what's
go.
a king without a crown?
All right. So this was a thought that I had. And I want to spell it all out here at once so I don't take too long and so I don't sound too retarded. Um, the way the first king, if you think about it, the way human tribal civilization developed, almost all of them fell into this same kind of mold where you have a single patriarchal leader who passes their authority down in a hereditary manner, from the king to the prince to the prince's son, so on and so forth. Of course, we've all moved away from that in this modern day, but for the vast majority of especially Western civilizations, way back in the day, this is kind of how it all started. And so you have to ponder how the original king got chosen, the very first one. And I think a reasonable argument could be made that you would take the population of the city or city state or tribal village or whatever you're looking at, and you would kind of filter it. So you have 100 people. You filter out the 10 of the eldest and wisest of them. And then you take those 10 and you take the 5 that are the strongest of those. And of them, you take the 2 that are the best orators or have done the best negotiations with other tribes or something like that. And then this being, barbarian times, maybe you make those 2 guys fight to the death Highlander style for the blessing of the gods or some shit. Anyway, the winner is the representative of the best qualities of the tribe. He's the wisest man. He's the strongest man. He's the most reasonable man with the best judgment. And this is the person that they appoint as the first king, because who could be better a leader than that? And the question that I was trying to answer is, why would kings pass their lines down in a hereditary manner? And the answer that came back was because it would be expected that the king's successor, his son, would be educated by the king and take on his qualities. The father teaches the son to be honorable, teaches him to be wise, teaches him to make smart decisions, to negotiate properly, and things like that. There are certain attributes that you could expect would be passed down. Well, the question that comes up is, what do you do about the asshole prince who will become king? The reason why monarchies kind of died out and why dictatorships are bad. It's said that the best form of government that you can have is a benevolent dictatorship, and that's probably true in all honesty. But the problem with dictatorship is dictators aren't immortal, and sooner or later you get the asshole dictator who comes in afterward. And the thing that I was trying to understand in my readings back in these days was, why would anyone follow an asshole king? Obviously, a king is not a god. He has to have people under him willing to follow and enforce his orders. So if everybody, you have a just and noble king and his son is a douchebag and the king dies and the son takes over, why does anyone listen to the douchebag still? When if nobody was willing to obey him, he could be ousted in a heartbeat. Any 3 people could walk up on him and march him out of the castle, and then the kingdom could just appoint a new king who wasn't an asshole. And the answer that I eventually came to was that it has to do with I think human beings are subconsciously susceptible to associating the trappings of quality with the position that traditionally carries them. And you actually just gave me a perfect example. When I asked you to describe a king, you didn't say the smartest man in the village or the kingdom. You didn't say the wisest man. You gave a physical description of him. You said he had power that was not democratically elected. He has lots of gold and he wears a crown. So if you take a plumber and you give him power and crown and a bunch of gold, does that make him a king? The answer, of course, is no. But people come to associate the trappings, the crown, the scepter, the robe, the throne, with being the king, even if the person who is occupying that position doesn't deserve them, because they don't have the qualities that establish the kingship in the first place. In fact, it's so bad that we apply them after the fact as adjectives. will say that this person was a good king, this person was a wise king, this person was an asshole king and a tyrant. Where the original concept of the idea that these trappings were granted to kind of reward was their qualities as a person. And now I'm going to make my point. This is why people still listen to the fucking media. The media that we have today is not the media. It is wearing the trappings of the legitimate media that we used to have. People see them come up. The channel name is still CNN. You still have the two guys sitting behind their desk wearing suits with the world map or whatever in the background, and they're talking about current events. People associate those trappings with news, with honest journalism, because the original conception of journalism and the news media as an industry was awarded those trappings in return for doing a good job of informing the public. And so you wind up with this weird scenario where you have the, I'm going to steal a popular term here, you have the red-pilled people for whom it's clicked that the king doesn't deserve to be a king. He's an asshole. He doesn't have the qualities of a king, no matter what he's wearing, and he shouldn't be in power. And those people are always going to conflict with the other half of the population who are still kind of following this human psychological trend where they associate those trappings with the qualities. They don't say that this man is a great man, he's wise, he's intelligent, he's all this and all that, therefore he should be king, and thus he should have a crown and a robe and a throne. They point at the guy and say, well, he's sitting in the throne and he's got the crown and the robe, ergo he is the king. They don't take it that one step up. They don't recall the original intent behind the trappings. And so the two factions fight. And it's those people who the king can count on, even if he's an asshole king, to continue enforcing his authority. Where if everybody was aware of the, the original intent behind the trappings, they could just unload him off the throne and kick him out. And we have the same problem going on today with the media. You and I and the rest of Gamergate are in the red-pilled army. We got to watch the son of a bitches in real time perform an act of cytogenesis on us, lie about us, lie about things that we were personally involved in. We know that it's a fraud. But at the same time, what we have is the people outside of our group. The SJW is the worst of them all, because they also bring their cultural Marxist nonsense into the mix as a reinforcing factor. They look at the media and they say that's the media. That these are the people who argue that Trump loosening libel laws infringes freedom of the press. This is not the press that we have. What we've got is propaganda outlets wearing the trappings of the free press. And I think the greatest hurdle probably of our times is making a significant enough majority of the masses to become aware of this, that they might actually be able to do something about it. Because right now the motion against it is bigger than it's ever been, at least in any history I'm aware of in the United States. But we still haven't gotten big enough to have palpable change yet.
I can certainly say, having worked in media, yeah, you wield a certain sort of power over people. You control their perception. Just language alone, changing around terminology, is enough to change how people view things. That's why we see the shift from, a simple one, from illegal immigrant to undocumented immigrant.
An interesting thing I stumbled across a while back was the publishers of the Style Guide, who actually make those recommendations.
Yes.
News media
AP
industry
Style Guide
are colossal fucking SJWs.
Yes, they are.
That's another axis that we've been infiltrated on.
Have you noticed this as well? There's been a shift from the leftists and general SJWs from using the term equality to equity.
Uh-huh.
Keep in mind that equity and equality are not the same thing, though they
Correct.
look like it's on paper stems from the whole A Theory of Justice by John Rawls, and that's basically the textbook for the modern social justice movement. That it is perfectly okay to give certain and specific advantages to people that are considered marginalized or otherwise underrepresented in order to balance the scales visually.
Yep. It's all about appearances of superiority and oppression.
Absolutely. Oh, dear God. Critical theory was one of the classes that I had to take for my journalism minor, funnily enough. So I picked up a lot of that stuff in there.
Well, on the upside, you have that working knowledge of your enemy's weapons is always helpful.
Absolutely. It's like, now I don't know, well, I know you did frequent 4chan.
Yeah, on and off several times over the years. I'd actually come away from a long absence when I came back to V for Gamergate.
How closely did you follow their Scientology ops?
That happened during the time that I was away, although I followed quite a bit of the history in the Long March afterwards.
Okay, all that happened about a year to a year and a half after I first started frequenting the site, but that was one of those things where you basically had to learn the terminology to talk about it and talk about it to Scientologists. And that's something that I've noticed has been repeated since Leah Remini started doing her Scientology exposés. Like you gotta know the lingo if you're even going to get your words out to these people. Pretty much the same thing with far left social justice, cultural Marxists nowadays. You have to know the terminology that they're using. You have to be able to decipher what they mean when they say things like cultural appropriation or something that would be kind of obvious, like black and brown people.
Right.
That's another thing that's sort of been shifted too. Instead of people of color, which would include, Asians, what we would think of as Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, Korean, that sort of descent, to black and brown folks, because the typical Asians that we think of still benefit from white privilege.
Right.
So
I notice that they rarely have anything to say about Native Americans, too.
Very, very rarely. Usually, if they do, it's about the fact that the U.S. is on occupied territory, or the Dakota Access Pipeline, or
oh God, don't even get me started on that debacle.
Yeah, the appropriating headdresses, or don't say you're 1/16th Cherokee because you're bullshitting, that sort of thing. I find that there is a very loud silence on reservations, on prevalence of alcoholism among native peoples, that sort of thing. It's largely about cultural appropriation and occupied territory.
Right. I think what it boils down to, at least in my opinion, is that they get offended over the things that they have been taught they should be offended by, rather than the things that are actually causing problems for these demographic groups that they're claiming to defend.
Yep, and right now it seems like black people are the big ones to really focus on, especially since Black Lives Matter.
Which was funded by who?
Major George Soros.
There you go.
I almost called him a doctor, but I don't want to insult the PhDs. Oh, but holy shit.
Hey, we almost managed to make it through this whole conversation without naming the Jew.
Almost. Although, given the current time and the fact that I still have some things to accomplish today,
Yeah, as do
su-
I. I was going to bring
su-
that up myself.
suppose we'll have to leave it here. But kind of like this, kind of think this needs to happen again.
You
Probably
know,
with a little more fanfare.
yeah, the way things are, it's my original promise to the board was that I wouldn't do streams or IRC chats, so there wouldn't be any risk of getting corrupted by the same pack of Twitter troll assholes who wound up co-opting and wrecking our first two boards. I think after 2 years of being the board owner and still retaining my sanity, I'm pretty sure I can handle a stream or two.
Probably so, just as long as schedules permit as well.
Yeah, if you invite me to IRC, I will find you.
Let that be the moral of the story. Don't attempt to dox Acid Man, because you will end up on an FBI watch list.
Attempting is funny. Succeeding will get your ass in trouble. I just have to wonder. It's like you think about Seattle for Truth in his fucking trial right now. What are the odds? What are the odds that somewhere that faggots folder and his entry in it is floating around between the hands of the people involved in setting his trial up?
Very interesting to think of.
We'll never know, but just you would think that the FBI might be somebody that they would call concerning his circumstances.
It'd be interesting.
That's a happy little thought in the back of my mind.
So, last question before we close it out. Acid, who do you think wrote the Titan post, and what do you think of it from the chat?
I actually know who wrote the Titan post. I'm not going to say too much about it because I don't want to let too much slip. As far as what I think of it, it was like a lot of the early material that came in support of GG Revolt. It raised up a few good points, and then it turned them around, always finding some way to kind of tangle it back against the main body of GG. For my personal philosophy, I'm not exactly the type who drifts with the winds, but I firmly believe that wherever this whole non-movement consumer revolt wants to go, the only choice that I have to make is, do I want to follow them, or is it time for me to step aside? Telling them what they should and shouldn't be doing and then throwing a hissy fit if they decide not to listen to me is not an option. Try to persuade, try to argue, but when you come out with the ethics cuck type condemnations and all the various other kind of chicanery that went on, especially back in those days when everything was so hot, I can't say that I probably support maybe a third of the content that was in the Titan post and probably 0% of its overall intentions related to the rest of GG as a whole. If that's a satisfactory answer.
I suppose that'll have to be. Well, anyway, I suppose everyone who stuck around came in. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was kind of glad to see a smaller audience.
It's always nice to not have to be watching the chat for comments and outrage. You can just kick back and talk and monologue without interruption.
I apologize for monologuing too much.
No. That's what this was for. This was for monologues, for God's sake. There's a time and place, and this was it.
Well, the problem is when I do it in text, I always sound like such a fucking autist. I even notice it myself. Like, I'll be going back through old V archives or something, and I'll see a post that I made, 12 months ago. It's like, hey, I remember that conversation, but I don't remember, like, why do I sound so energetic or angry? It's like, I don't remember being upset about any of that at all. It's just something that comes out of me in the way I type, I guess. Hopefully I did a little bit better via voice chat.
I think you did all right, even for a $25 Best Buy headset.
Yeah, I can't hear myself on this, so I hope I don't sound like too much shit.
No, it's all right.
All right.
Well, anyway, I suppose we will close this out. So thanks again, everybody. Thanks for joining me, Acid Man, and we will see if we can do another one of these in the future.
Yeah, might be fun. All right, Hat, you have a good night.
Alrighty, you too.
Bye.